last time we were talking about the Alienware thing, do you remember there was like an external thing that you could plug in
an eGPU?
Was that to get like more power out of it?
It's called an eGPU, an
Are
external
those
GPU.
dependable? Does it ever work? It seemed, but I think this one was also like specific for that model or something.
So the way that it works is that
it's like auxiliary power.
I'm gonna get very techie on you.
Okay.
There are multiple versions of this, and you can buy one on AliExpress that doesn't work, that uses USB.
Like external graphics.
Spoilers. USB doesn't have enough data or power to transmit the power of a graphics card.
Right. I think that was
basically what you need to do is you need to create a specialized port on the back of the machine that can transport PCIe Express, which is the slot on the motherboard that a graphics card uses.
Did this box as we have that?
I don't remember that being there.
No.
Yeah, that's a pretty specialized feature.
They did not work as well when you had the Steam machine.
Mm-hmm.
But now, if you get like, a good example is like a Razer Blade, the laptops Razer sells.
Yeah.
They sell their own GPU that has a specialized port on the laptop.
Okay.
And you can put like a 4080 in it and then like dock the laptop and it becomes a desktop and has
I think
full
I've
graphics
seen
power.
like what the proprietary cables like look like for them. But I'm just like I don't know. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around like it's like the RAM pack of the N64. Like I need to get a little more juice out of this thing. Just like plug it in.
Ironically enough, going back to the last episode,
I would love to do that and not have to take an entire computer apart.
The problems with a lot of eGPUs is that Windows, surprise, surprise, has a lot of trouble switching. So, like, people will buy one and they'll put an expensive graphics card in it and then they'll plug it into your computer and then they'll play a game and be like, why doesn't this run like shit? And then they'll find out that the Windows isn't actually reading the graphics card as the graphics card. It's still using the input display.
Both at the same time, or do you have to kind of like direct?
Probably picks one.
What it's supposed to do is when it senses the external one plugged in, it uses that.
It doesn't just multiply your video memory.
But also, it's like the laptop has an HDMI cable on it, but also the graphics card has an HDMI cable on it. So you have to have, like, if you want to use the external GPU, you have to have an HDMI cable plugged from that into the monitor. But if you want to use the monitor without that, you need an HDMI cable plugged into the computer. But if you plug the HDMI cable in wrong, just like a regular computer, it won't use the right graphics card. It's
dual monitors.
You know, we're talking about Windows. When Andrew last episode brought up Windows 8 being designed for mobile, and I'm using Windows 11, and still it's like, yo, do you want to be on battery saver mode? And I'm like, what fucking battery? I'm plugged into a wall.
Welcome back to Hot Button. This is part 3, episode 2 of our series on Valve Corp.
Part 2, episode 2. We don't use 3s.
Oh, gosh, damn it. You're right. Yeah.
And then when Andrew updates it later, it'll be episode Alex.
Is it they referred to as the Valve Corporation, or is it Valve Inc.? It's Valve Corporation.
Valve,
right?
Valve Corporation.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fine makers of Artifact. I'm kidding. We all know their victories. So where we left off last, host Andrew Banks was enlightening us on the history of their hardware and beginnings, and the Steam machine, the Steam Link, the Steam controller. I should say hardware and operating system beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's time for them to step into a different realm. Well, actually, 2 different realms.
It's time for them to go from an L to a W.
Yeah, we're talking VR. We're talking handhelds. That and what's ahead for this industry giant? Will they ever give us a new OS? What's going to happen when Gabe Newell departs? I'm Randall Beatrice, here in the studio with Austin Blakesley.
Hello.
And the aforementioned Andrew Banks.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, down from New York City. Let's get into it.
All right.
That was not meant to be an impression of Matt Berry's.
New York City.
So I think you said we were leaving off with an L, and let's get back to that L, because this was not the best moment in Valve's history. Right after the Steam machines launched to, unceremonious affair.
We are in 2015, 2016?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Okay.
But it wasn't the only thing they were up to during this time period. You see some big things were happening in gaming hardware at the time, especially in the PC space. But even though we are in 2015 or 2016 at this point, to add some context, we're going to have to go back in time to 2006.
Oh, shit. The year of the Wii.
Exactly.
And the PlayStation 3.
Exactly. So time to make us all feel old. Someone born
Too
the
late.
same year that the Nintendo Wii came out would be a legal adult now.
Stop. Don't do that.
Now, the influence the kid...
Everybody younger than me shouldn't be able to drink or drive.
Certainly not at the same time.
Only I should be able to do that.
we do not endorse this, guys. Disclaimer,
I can't drink. My liver don't work.
The influence the Wii had is wearing off these days, but it was enormous at the time.
A waggle.
It influenced the PS3 6-axis and Move, as well as the Xbox Connect, which is
we did that.
Hot Button episode 89.
Yeah.
And it influenced Valve.
Also, look out in the future for Xbox
Yes.
Connect Part 2.
Andrew, you see behind you that big stack of fucking Connect
There's
games?
a shelf full of Connect games that we're going to get to.
It's got Steel Battalion in there. And
I can't actually see it from my perspective,
okay.
but yeah, right over my shoulder, I could kind of see the corner of one of the
we're
boxes.
going to get into some
You
Blackwater.
don't see Sonic Free Riders or Fighters Uncaged or Connectimals.
Man, all those kids that we just talked about that are now adults, they're just like, what are all these peripherals and games you guys are talking about?
I know.
They had no idea and that's the thing is like, we just listed a bunch of stuff that was an enormous influence at the time that now has next to no influence
These
these
kids
days.
don't even know what a Novant Falcon is.
I was gonna say what legacy has like the Wii Fit board left on us? Like
Through memes, probably more than the Wii itself.
It definitely left an influence on landfills.
Yeah. Oh god, every thrift store.
Yeah, Goodwill's.
Five Below.
Yeah. And that's not gonna have a resurgence like Rock Band guitars. Yeah.
So yeah, motion controls were huge back then, but funny enough, for most of the Wii's life, they were horribly inaccurate, reduced to just pointing and shaking motions.
Yeah, no shit. They had to come back a few years later with Motion Plus and be like, this is actually the way it was supposed to work.
Randy, stop reading my script. That was the next bullet point. Devices like the PlayStation
Like
Move
two
and the
candles
Wii
in there.
Motion Plus would make something more closely resembling one-to-one representations of your movements in the video game.
Yeah.
And however you feel about motion controls, the Wii was huge at the time, and it was nothing if not innovative.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the first time that Nintendo designed some crazy new hardware and some brand new games to show why you would want it.
I had more fun camping out for the Wii than playing it, but I will say, like,
Damn.
those first few, those first few weeks with Wii Sports and
Oh, yeah.
Red Seal and Zelda Excite Truck and Trauma Center, like, those are good.
You don't
out
have
the
to be
gate.
an apologist to say that Wii Sports was a great game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Wii Sports was a great
Legendary.
game, and it came with the console, and that's why the attach rate was so low for
That's
that
all you
console.
needed.
You just, I got it.
Yeah. And there are other Wii games that I still like quite a bit. I had fun with like Metroid Prime.
I think they're all dog shit. Continue.
I did. Well, the Wii was the console that broke the Nintendo spell or curse it had on me, because I remember playing like third-party games. I think it was like Splinter Cell or like Double Agent on the Wii, and I was like, what am I doing?
It was not a good time.
I was like, this looks and runs and controls
Nintendo
terrible.
has only made one good piece of hardware since
The
the Wii came
GameCube,
out.
baby. Since the Wii came out.
I was gonna say the 3DS. It's
Eh.
probably the best.
But here's the funny thing about the 3DS is that like the 3D was also a novelty that like 2 years into its run they just stopped caring
I
about
know,
it.
but I'm just saying that like
Yeah.
Now,
the Switch is garbage. Is what I was getting at.
Yeah,
and to add a little more context for people who weren't there at the time, all those legal adults that were born that year, this was the first time that Nintendo consoles lagged behind the competition in terms of power. So all those third-party ports that Randy was just mentioning, they were way worse than the versions you would get
Well,
elsewhere.
Technically, the Wii was just an overclocked GameCube.
Yeah.
So it was still more powerful than the PS2.
But it wasn't in that competition, right? Like,
No, it was still more powerful than the PS2. Because there was a lot of ports that came to the PS2 and the Wii.
no,
in like
you're right. That is
2007.
true. But it was like if it's directly competing with the 360 and the PS3, that was
360 is like the
the
greatest
Wii. The
console
Wii
ever
wasn't
made,
even
so.
the Wii wasn't even HD. Like
I mean, the 360 didn't come with an HDMI port initially.
initially, yeah.
But it still output 720. Anyway, so
Hey, so did the PS2.
sometimes.
PS2 came out in 2001.
On
The
one,
Wii should
one
be
game,
more
Gran
powerful than it.
Turismo 4 or
Yeah.
5
Oh, wow.
did 720.
Damn, they
Yeah.
pushed that to the extreme.
So yeah,
OG Xbox games.
Nintendo was making hardware and software in tandem. all the way back to at least Super Mario 64 in 1996, showing all
Fucking
the
A.
possible different ways that you could use this new thing called an analog stick to control 3D games in new ways.
Shit.
Super Mario 64
And
is
they nailed it.
Yeah.
Super Mario 64 is Gabe Newell's favorite game, or at least was at
Really?
the time of reporting.
Awesome.
And he's a big fan of Super Mario
Masterpiece.
Galaxy, as it turns out.
No, Mario Galaxy is a great game. I just
Actually,
I didn't want to point at
yeah,
the screen the whole time.
At the time of reporting,
Yeah.
but
At the time of reporting.
his new favorite is Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
And
Find me a quote on that.
that just outdated everyone's favorite game when Suicide Squad killed it. Yeah.
Game kicks ass. You guys
And
are all wrong.
While I wouldn't say that Super Mario Galaxy was the game was the finest example of motion controls,
No.
it certainly got
Collect those star bits.
it certainly got the wheels turning at Valve and seemed to inspire the direction of the company.
I rescind it. It's a good game. Not a great game.
Galaxy?
Yeah.
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 Sometime
good. It's
sometime
fine.
in 2011, Gabe Newell went to meet Nintendo and had talks with Shigeru Miyamoto.
Odyssey is better.
Shigeru Miyamoto, Satoru Iwata, or both. It's a bit
Wow.
a bit unclear since these accounts came from Newell's son, who was a child at the time.
Those people in the same room, like
They were in the same
And the
room.
world didn't explode? That's crazy.
These accounts came from Newell's son, who was a child at the time, and played Mario Galaxy with Miyamoto while they were in Japan.
how
which-
old?
Oh man, I don't want to make up a number, but I want to say under 10.
Okay.
Yeah. The actual
Kids are all liars.
he is younger than us by a handful of years. So
yeah, Gabe Newell's uncle works at Nintendo.
we're all in our early to mid 30s, and this guy is a little bit younger than us, like maybe 5 years younger than us.
Gotcha.
So the actual agenda of this meeting was never officially disclosed, as far as I can tell, but presumably it was to discuss a joint venture with Nintendo.
In an alternate universe somewhere.
Worth noting, around the same time was when Steam came to PlayStation 3 for exactly one game, Portal 2,
yeah.
and that was it.
That's why last episode I made a joke about
Yep.
him being 83, and it was to promote that. Also, another topic that we covered, Austin, the PlayStation Network outage, which happened like right around the time that Portal 2 launched on the PS3,
Man.
and it like killed that. Like
It
like irreparably damaged.
It happened. They said this in the episode. It happened when SOCOM
So
4
that's why Zipper was like,
Zipper got shut down.
yeah.
It happened when SOCOM 4, Portal 2, and Mortal Kombat 9 came
Oh,
out.
that is a bad.
It was
yeah,
all
I
in
think
the
Mortal
same
MK9 launched the same day.
Yep.
Listen,
great day for gaming.
I played
But-
MK9 online on 360 like 2 months after release, and the online was already dead because the netcode was bad. So
Yeah.
they didn't miss out on too much there.
No, but the Portal thing was major because it was like they were promoting like crossplay with PC as well.
There was a button on Steam for years, children again, as we address you in this podcast. There was a button on Steam for years that said PS3 players log in here. In order to like.
Did they
link your
eventually
account.
patch that out?
Oh yeah, that's been gone for a couple of years now, but it was there for so long.
I mean, the PlayStation Network doesn't run on a PS3 anymore.
Oh
So.
well, yeah. I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
Also,
I
like,
only got to play one game of SOCOM
Didn't-
4
didn't
ever.
that's a shame.
Mhm.
I liked SOCOM, but it like obviously Portal 2 goes with saying one of the best games of all time. But it's like
Some might say the fourth best game of all time.
it's up there. And it's a thing of being like if I recall, did that game, because Orange Box ran pretty poorly on PS3 famously,
Mhm.
and then I
Yeah,
don't know.
they had a really hard time porting games. To the
Yeah, I don't know
PS3,
about
yeah.
Left 4 Dead either. The cell processor
Left 4
fucked it up.
Dead. I think
But,
was
like-
not on PlayStation. I think.
Oh,
yeah.
2 might have been.
I think
eventually.
it was not on PlayStation because the Orange Box was such a
Really?
pain for them
Okay.
on PS3.
That's why I'm just saying, it's interesting to point out that partnership, that relationship, because it was like, I was like, oh, you're shacking up with after Orange Box went that way? Like, all right. And because, I mean, I played Portal 2 initially on 360 and then on PC and looked at man pretty great there. So, I don't know.
Well, that partnership never really shook out, because if it did, we'd have Half-Life Alex on PSVR.
That's very true.
Man, that's a hell of a thing, right? Is like they advertise the PC compatibility by
That's
showing
it in the picture.
by
That's-
showing a screen. Well, let me
that's
So to
fun
add
to
context to the episode,
Yes.
because in the here and now we know what we're talking about without
Yes.
every word. But there's an ad for the PSVR 2 working on PC, showing it hooked up to a computer playing Half-Life Alyx, which is a glaring omission from PSVR 2's catalog. So it's like it's bold of them to just it's bold of them to put the quiet part out loud in the ad for this
And
compatibility
to ask
thing.
for permission to do that, too, I assume.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
I looked it up. Left
Yeah.
4 Dead was contractually bound to Xbox. When
Rock.
Overkill developed a Left 4 Dead themed No Mercy DLC for Payday the Heist, they stated that they couldn't release the DLC for PS3 because, quote, Left 4 Dead is Xbox 360 exclusive on consoles, so this Payday DLC will never come to PS3 for contractual reasons.
I never knew they did that.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, there was still a handful of games that time that just didn't come out on PS3.
Now, I'm not saying that Valve didn't sign that deal because the PS3 was such a nightmare to play.
Yeah,
with.
what are we missing out on, really? A whole bunch of misery trying to make Team Fortress 2
we
work on this thing?
get bonus money and we don't have to port to the PS3? Uh-oh.
Also, we should point out, like going forward, there wasn't really a lot of games coming out of Valve at that time that would be on console anyway.
What?
So,
Spoilers.
Yeah.
We will get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be difficult to say for sure if the inspiration came from this meeting with Nintendo, but Valve has cited inspiration from Nintendo for what's to come. Nintendo has a history of designing innovative software and innovative hardware in tandem with one another to create unforgettable video games.
Yeah.
Now imagine if this meeting had come after the Wii U had launched. The meeting coalesced with some interesting developments in the hardware space around 2012. When he wasn't busy walking around barefoot or fundraising for the worst president of the United States in preparation of another future Hot Button episode, Palmer Luckey was engineering a game changer in the field of virtual reality.
Do you remember the cover, the famous, the photo?
Oh yeah, the one where his feet are off the ground.
Stupid. He's like on a beach. He's like, whoa.
Oh, I'm floating.
Yeah, and you're just like, you just discredited this entire medium.
I mean, that wasn't on him. That was on the photographer or whoever. But
I know, but he still looked like a dingus.
Yeah,
This is before we found out. He was an
The
asshole, but-
photographer's only as good as the subject.
how do we make this nerd look cool?
Yeah, impossible.
You can't.
Yeah.
The Oculus Rift raised 2.3. Sorry, people know it these days as the MetaQuest.
Fucking.
The Oculus Rift raised $2.3 million to kickstart a new generation of VR headsets.
Yeah.
Frequently, the
I
source.
played the Model 1 at PAX.
Hold on, I gotta look something up. Continue talking.
Frequently the source of inspiration for science fiction, including my favorite movie, The Matrix. The combination of high refresh rate displays and
Celebrating its 25th anniveration this year. I'm going back to see it in the theater.
Yeah, now
Can't
do
wait.
you feel even older now than the Wii part?
No.
The combination of high refresh rate displays and motion tracking technology made VR a renewed target for brilliant engineers. Valve was getting in on the experiments, as were the likes of John Carmack. Just don't ask ZeniMax about it. Lots of future hot button topics in the story, I'm realizing.
Jeez. This really splatters out into you're going to need a whiteboard.
We'll get the red string.
Yeah.
All right. In their prototyping, Valve had been heading toward augmented reality up to this point, but the success of the Oculus Rift Kickstarter drew attention toward virtual reality by 2013. And it just, I guess I really didn't define augmented reality, but that's basically you are looking through a visor and then the computer is superimposing things that look like they're in the real world, but they're not. So if I'm looking in this studio and I see this couch in front of me, augmented reality could put a person on the couch next to Austin that isn't actually there. And it would look like they're there to me. That's augmented reality.
Yes. Or what was the Microsoft HoloLens? Yeah. I remember that presentation at E3 years ago where they're like, look, it's like Minecraft on your table.
Yeah.
And then,
I want to
nothing
introduce
happened.
a little game.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You said how much?
$2.3 million. for the
$2.3
Oculus
million
Rift.
for Kickstarter. How much do you
Yes.
think, if you don't already know,
All right.
the deal for Facebook was?
Oh,
buy
that they got bought
Oculus.
for it?
Oh, was that like $2 billion?
Yep.
All right.
Just move a decimal and
2.3. Okay, so $400 million in cash, 23.1 million shares of Facebook valued at $1.6 billion at the time, as well as an additional $300 million, assuming Facebook reaches certain milestones with the Oculus brand. There's where your Kickstarter money went, you rubes.
They just 1,000x'd it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we covered augmented reality. Each of the several different ongoing attempts at VR resulted in great head tracking like the world had never seen before. But perhaps inspired by their earlier AR attempts, their augmented reality attempts, Valve had something special. The Room. I'm putting that in quotes. That's officially what they called it.
Tommy Wiseau movie?
Exactly. No, not at all. The Room was a space for testing out hardware with QR codes all over the walls that their headset would read, but when adapted for VR, they found that it really gave you a sense of presence in the space where you could walk around it like Star Trek's holodeck.
Weird. Trying to picture that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are pictures of this that you...
Are there?
Yeah, it's pretty wild looking.
Make that the thumbnail.
I'm going to say, I do note this later in the script, but a lot of the stuff from this era of Valve comes from the final hours of Half-Life Alyx, which is an interactive documentary that Jeff Keighley put together.
Yes.
It's on Steam.
I wanted to play Alex, so I didn't watch the documentary. I didn't think it would be spoilers.
Yeah, in fact, that thing is full of spoilers.
That's why I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I would not recommend going through it until you've played Alex. And also, note for the listeners, I tried to get these guys to play that game for the last 4 years.
Randy stole my headset.
Yeah, you didn't steal it. You left it here.
You're over here all the time. You could have just stolen it back.
It doesn't work because he has a window.
Yeah.
What about-
I
what
tried
if-
to play it, and then the
But what if
sun
you
was
steal
out.
it and bring it back to your house and play in a room with the windows
Listen, I
closed?
thought about it, but that sounds like a lot of
Yeah,
work.
tired.
I'll give you guys
He
some
likes
more
to
shit for
stand
this
up
later,
playing
but
video games.
this guy. All right. Announced in 2015 and released on April 5th, 2016, Valve partnered with HTC to produce their first VR kit built on those experiments, the Vive. The Vive had two Wii-inspired motion controllers that are pinpointed in 3D space by way of two lighthouse sensors, lighthouses in quotes, that's their official name for them, that sit in opposite corners of the room.
Wait, why is it called the Vive?
I don't know, but the lighthouse ones I can tell you though, they're actually painting an infrared grid across the room so they can actually make a coordinate system with the two sensors. And when I found out that's how it worked, that was pretty wild. And that's also why
clever.
Sunlight can disrupt it. So is because it's the infrared lasers. The sunlight is actually sending out some infrared as well.
Then I'd have to buy some curtains, and then
Oh man, who wants curtains?
I gotta put them up.
It's called the Vive because for the same reason the Vita was called the Vita. It means life in another language.
Okay.
Going back to episode part 1 where Andrew said that programmers are bad at naming things. There you go.
This one was probably actually named by a marketing department, if I had to guess, because if a programmer named it, it would be a pun on the thing that it was based on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway,
Like Motrack or some shit.
yeah. Okay, in so many ways, motion controllers in VR were performing intuitive one-to-one actions in the ways that the previous generation of motion controls promised but couldn't deliver. It was originally demoed with a game called Robot Repair at GDC, and Robot Repair would go on to be featured in The Lab. Keeping the Nintendo
The Lab.
keeping the Nintendo inspiration train rolling, The Lab was intended to be the Wii Sports of Steam VR, the software platform baked into Steam that the Vive uses. There were a handful of different mini-games in the lab, including one sort of like Angry Birds, where you knock down boxes in a warehouse with a giant slingshot.
I did this at the library.
Yeah.
I remember, my one roommate John, they had a Vive like station like set up at the like local library.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Another one that's an archery tower defense game with some haptic feedback on the bowstring. That is, to me, like everybody was losing their minds over the new PlayStation controller.
Oh yeah, because the Horizon.
Because they got that rumble built in. But like that same technology is in the Vive controllers. So like I've experienced that rumble tech in a VR space where, in my opinion, it makes way more sense. And so it's like when everyone's like, "Oh yeah, check this out, it's so good." I was like, "Oh, so it's like the Vive, but like I don't get to pull a bowstring back and feel the tension."
Well, there's
like,
there's supposed to be like resistance.
yeah, it's a really cool effect. And a good number of scenarios in the lab that were just kind of a sense of place. But one of which let you play fetch with a robot dog.
Yes,
that robot dog is very cute.
Yes,
though Valve internally,
not to be confused with Dog from Half-Life. It was also...
here's where I okay.
Very cute.
Though Valve internally had their Source 2 engine mostly done, it was notably not ready in time for VR. And the lab was actually built on the Unity engine, which I believe we brought up in episode 85.
Oh, that's one of the ones you guys tricked me on, I think, because I think I just said Source when we were...
Well, you would like Valve builds all of their other games in their own engine, so why would they build it in Unity?
That's what's weird.
And the answer was
you won. In the long run, you won.
I think you got like two
So, like-
wrong, maybe.
Yeah, but like Unity, there's a whole episode about how you won in.
There's a separate Unity episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like
Yeah, we
Unity
can
was
connect
ready
with
to
that.
go with VR code, and Valve themselves,
We're not ready.
Even though they built the companion technology in Steam VR,
but they needed something that to show off the
their engine was
device,
not
so.
ready to build the lab by the time the Vive was going to launch, so they had to build it in Unity.
Okay, it's funny.
And I'm guessing that probably the two of you have more experience with PSVR than anything else, but
Yes.
did you get to try out proper room scale VR at any point?
Yeah. I have an Oculus.
Okay, cool. And you know, how did you feel about that? And how do you feel about the lab itself? And what are your general opinions on the current, like, let's say the to your experience, the latest batch of VR stuff?
It was magic, and now I'm over it.
That's fair, but like
not to come across dismissive.
No, like some of that magic too. Like my favorite experience with VR is there's this score chaser sniper game called The Last Sniper VR, and it is a World War II sniper game it starts you off, you immediately bash a Nazi over the head with a rock. And I was like, wow, that was a life-size Nazi. He was like my height.
That's a big Nazi.
Which you don't really think about until you're in the space, right?
Sure.
But also, well, real quick, there was also, they put you in a plane to jump out with the airborne. And my brain did not want to let me walk out of this plane, even though I know I'm just in a living room, right? Like, it was wild. And it really is effective.
My story about how VR can't ever deliver the immersive experiences that they planned it to is that I bought the PSVR and then I bought the Rift, and my mom wanted to try it. So we had Job Simulator, and she wanted to do the cooking one because my mom likes cooking, and she stumbled over the cord and instinctively put her hands on the counter that wasn't actually there to catch herself, and then fell into my TV and broke my PSVR, and also luckily did not get injured.
Yes.
But also scratched the TV. So there you go.
That's an unfortunate experience.
Yeah.
So it's like
there were a lot of like Wii Sports videos from back in the day before they started including those wrist straps on them. Where people would
those are good.
Throw the baseball, but the baseball is a controller that you're not supposed to actually let go of, and then it just goes right through their TV.
Me and VR hung out for like maybe a year or two, and you know it was a time, and I played everything from the sit-down ones like Thumper and Tetris Effect that you do with a controller to more larger, robust experiences like Resident Evil 7, and I even got the Far Point, the one with the big gun peripheral, and
for PSVR.
PSVR, yeah, and mostly because I never had a computer that was really built for.
That's modern, though. That's not modern, though.
No, I know. I'm just talking about like
for the purposes of this discussion, I'd say it's modern enough.
I never got to try much of Alex or the Medal of Honor, but it's like now people are like The Walking Dead. People are pretty happy with
Asgard's Wrath.
Azura's Wrath, whatever.
Asgard's Wrath 2.
But it's like where I got is that it was like there was a point where Alex is now 4 years old, which is shocking to say, and it's like
the bar has not been raised
exactly, and it's like. I thought Alex would be a make or break moment for it. I mean, VR now is people mostly use it as like social spaces and things like that, which
Metaverse,
which I don't have any interest in. But it's like
Decentraland.
But it's like I'm sure there's immersive experience. It's like it's like when we watch the conferences together and we see things like that Batman game or that Assassin's Creed game. It's like, yeah, I'd try that, but it's like I don't know. I guess I'm just
my
don't
problem
have the mood much anymore.
My problem with VR is not the software. My problem with VR is the hardware. Here's my story.
You don't like wearing a giant honking thing on your head?
No, it's not necessary. I can't do that for very long.
Yeah.
I ever since the coma, I got a little balance
issues.
What a win.
Yeah. But no, my big thing was I remember I bought an Oculus Rift S. And then they created the first Quest, which then became the Meta Quest. And I remember that was when they ported the old version of Resident Evil 4 to VR, not the new version.
Yeah.
And I was like, sick. And then I went to download it, and they were like, Quest exclusive. And I went, my headset came out 2 years ago, and the Quest just came out.
Fucked.
And then they did that again when the Quest 2 came out, and they did it again with that Assassin's Creed game when the Quest 3 came out. And so now, give me a VR headset. Like, maybe I'll buy an Index if it goes down in like 4 years, and then I'll play that.
Yeah.
I need hardware that's stable that I'm not going to be able to not play. Like, I already know that the Oculus Rift S I have was one of the lesser ways to play Half-Life Alyx when I bought it because the Vive existed and the Index existed.
It's messy.
And like, I don't do well with like you telling me that I'm not playing on the best version of hardware. That's why I buy the PS4 Pro when it comes out.
They're figuring stuff out because before it was always like this takes up too much room. You have to have the setup for it, and
I don't care.
I know.
I understand what you're
saying. It's expensive.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm not buying another $500 headset to be told later that I can't play a game because it doesn't work on
it
only works on the latest $500
I'm just talking about it's funny. The hardware itself, like by all accounts, the PS VR 2 sounds amazing, but it's like the fuck are you gonna do on it? So they're just not being supported, which I guess is a chicken and egg issue. But it's like I got into the PSVR 1 mostly because it was a cheaper and more accessible kind of option for me. But
And by all accounts, comfortable too.
yeah, and they had a lot of relationships with game, especially if you wear glasses and stuff, which I don't, but I know a lot of people do. But then it was like, VR is also kind of inherently antisocial, and I liked that the PSVR, you have your games like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is a very clever idea where one person's wearing other people yelling. But it's like the fact that you can see what people are seeing on the TV, which now isn't. I think they all do that. But
Mine even did it back in the day too.
It was rare out the gate.
No, Steam VR does that.
Okay, but not.
It's built into Steam VR.
Oculus.
Oculus doesn't do that.
Okay.
So, what I'll say about it is, because I'm kind of in a similar spot as you guys, is like Half-Life Alyx is an amazing game. One of the best first-person shooters I've ever played. Definitely the best VR thing I've ever played. Yeah. And if we got
anything anywhere near close to it,
any trickle of games that were in that ballpark, I'd still be.
Nobody's even trying.
It's
like intimidating.
To do what Half-Life Alyx did cost like $100 million, right? So no, I don't.
Who's equipped for it?
Well, exactly. It's like a lot of the people that are trying the VR games are not the ones that have the capital for it, and the people who have the capital for it are risk averse. So you're not going to going to invest it in a niche platform. And so as far as the hardware goes, I think mine is good enough. I don't have that same problem that Austin does. Maybe I did back in the day.
If I had a Vive, I'd feel differently. It was the fact that I invested in the Oculus ecosystem, and now my two options to get out of that are the Index, which is still $1,000, or buy a PSVR 2 and their new adapter that lets it work on PC, which together is $600. So I'm out for now.
Yeah, so
I don't trust Facebook for shit. They can fuck off and die.
That's exactly it. Like I would never buy an Oculus, a Meta Quest.
I bought it because it was a cost-effective.
No, I understand, but it's like when I don't have that problem where I need to have the latest greatest, but I do have the problem where if you tell me something is exclusive to your platform, I raise the middle finger and I go with the person who doesn't have the exclusivity. Because that just harms everyone, and I want to harm you now.
They're still doing it. There's PSVR 2 shit that's exclusive. There's Oculus shit that's very locked down, and it's
that's what I mean. But like,
how is anything going to grow if everybody's like
exactly, Randy? Like that's the thing that again, we had our criticisms of Valve and exactly how open they are, but this is exactly why openness is the better way forward. That's why Linux was able to grow. That's how Valve was able to create an operating system that could still do what Microsoft does over the course of 30 years with billions or trillions more dollars. And that's openness benefits everyone, both on the commercial side and the customer side.
It's just like it's like I get dry. You want healthy competition, but it's like it's asinine to do it for something like VR, which takes a lot of convincing in the first place because you also nobody is sold on VR unless you used it once. Yeah. It's like you can't get anything out of reading articles and watching videos, which is why nobody covers that.
I had a conversation with fellow guest of the podcast, Matt Nudeboom, recently, where he was going off about how much he loves VR, but he just bought his dad the Quest 3.
Oh yeah, I was over when they were
that out. And he was talking about how cool it was, but he was disappointed that there's not enough software support.
Yeah.
And the thing I said is that this is a little bit of a soapbox for me, but when you think about computing as a whole, video games included, it's like a guy does it in his garage, and then a bunch of guys do it in their garage, and then 5 years later those guys get together and they put together something that more people can use, and then 10 years later it becomes a product, and then 10 years later that product is developed. And it's there's only one version of modern hardware that I can think of that wasn't developed like that is ubiquitous, and that's a smartphone.
Yeah.
Everything else is if Palmer Luckey had kickstarted this thing and given the Kickstarter units out to a bunch of crazy nerds in their garages, and they spent 10 years toying with VR, and then it released now in the form it is now, things would be different.
Yeah.
But it had to be acquired. It had to become a product. And that was what I'm saying is
they forced
Valve Valve made the Index. They put all their work into it. They made sure it was good. And it's the Index that came out when Half-Life Alyx came out is still the Index you can buy today. But Oculus at the other end of that coin, where it's there have been
how many versions
since that Kickstarter in 2014 or whatever?
That was 2012, I want to say.
2012. So a little over a decade, there have been 7 Oculus headsets.
And some of them, like you've pointed out, completely obsolete. Like you can't play the newest.
Some of them they rendered obsolete by software, like saying, "Oh yeah, we don't support this anymore."
Are you fucking kidding
bricked.
me?
Yeah, some of them. Been bricked.
It's a product. It was a product before it
seems
became
like a violation of consumer rights.
Sure does, but we don't have those here. We're in America.
We're gonna move to Europe.
It's a product first and a technology second, and that's a common thing with a lot of stuff nowadays, and it's very not in the spirit of like when you were talking in the last part about like where, Multics became Unix, which became Linux thing. It's like there's still stuff like that exists. Open source stuff is still a thing. People are still toying away. But like not in the corporate version of technology that we live in now. It's like products become revolutionary once in a lifetime, and then everything is just iterative, and the iterations become less and less important, I feel. And that sums up like VR just came out at the wrong time and was acquired by the wrong company.
Well, back to the lab. For all the different components of the lab that showed off what VR could do, there was one mini game that didn't make the cut. It was simply called Shooter. Shooter puts you in the middle of a Half-Life universe combine firefight. Sound familiar?
Oh, I saw footage of this. Before. Yeah.
So Valve's
before this was actually.
Valve's aspirations to design new engines and hardware alongside new games resulted in a good number of started but never finished game prototype ideas, many of which weren't in VR. There was a highly systems-driven action RPG, simply codenamed RPG. There was a new Left 4 Dead project. And much like Left 4 Dead, Valve was prototyping a replayable first-person shooter that would have procedural missions, except those missions would be surrounded by more traditional, story-based, hand-authored moments to tie them all together. That game was Half-Life 3.
Wait. Oh, okay. I was like, I remember reading the script, and it was actually pretty good. Even I know they had to flip a lot of things around.
So
but I didn't know what the pitch was gameplay wise.
Real quick, what Randy's referring to is Epistle 3, which is an unofficial pitch for what the story they were going to go through for Half-Life 3.
Yeah.
From the original writer before he retired. They scrapped that project, and so he replaced it with all the names changed.
Yeah. I'm going to say, it's unofficial, but still kind of official. There's
right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly, because that was what the story was going to be.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, for all we know, this was just one of many prototypes.
Probably. If it's Half-Life 3, there's probably 10 different...
We also talked about that there's a canceled prototype. You know that game we played, Viewfinder?
Yeah.
That was based off a canceled prototype for a sequel to Portal called Aperture, where you took pictures with a camera.
I did hear about this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So, to me, that was always the perfect way to do a Half-Life 3 was to have it replayable and procedural and have it not end the same way in particular, because Half-Life is a game...
resolve that cliffhanger.
Well, that's the thing. Half-Life is a series where every entry ends in a cliffhanger, and it's about someone who travels through space and time against his will. So,
really, loop around on that?
Exactly, and because any conclusion you could write to it might be unsatisfying, so if you give everybody...
You're selling me. Initially, I was like, I don't know, but then...
Well, it's if you give everybody a bunch of wild ways that the game could play out, and people could argue over which one they liked best, that's probably the better way to do a Half-Life 3.
But as long as each feels crafted and not just
So that's exactly, and also I didn't note this in my script, but this was around the same time that The Crossing would have been in development, which was that...
The Crossing?
It was a joint project with Arcane that was going to be, you know how when you play Half-Life 2, you are going through Rebel firefights, and then you go through a single player thing, and then you're in another Rebel firefight or whatever. So the idea behind The Crossing was that all of those Rebel firefights would be PvP multiplayer shooter maps.
Oh, weird.
And the objective would be for one side to escort you to the other side, and the player character in their story would have to achieve the mission. And so this game had a trailer but never released, and it came out in that No Clip documentary.
Yeah, it's a neat it reminds me vaguely of what the Resident Evil 6 did, where you would run into other people at different parts of the campaign.
It's very similar to that.
But you could also jump into random online matches as the enemies.
Yeah.
So it was it was ambitious.
And keep in mind when that game released too, is there's a lot of intersection of these ideas around that same period in time. So The only reason Shooter didn't actually make it into the lab was simply development time. They believed it was the strongest demo of the lab, but it wasn't going to come together in time for the release date. It did, however, inspire Valve to build a more fully featured Half-Life project in the VR space. There's a lengthy history of iteration and experiments with games, especially VR games around this time. And obviously, these experiments resulted in Half-Life Alyx, which is awesome. And if you'd like to see all that history in Half-Life Alyx and all of Valve's canceled games in more detail, and it really is fascinating, I recommend you check out the final hours of Half-Life Alyx, where it is all spelled out with a timeline where you can kind of see like where one thing started and another thing stopped. It's really interesting. Once again, it is full of spoilers for Half-Life Alyx, so if you do intend to go in fresh to that, do it before you see this. So what we do have time to get into in this episode is that that project would become Half-Life Alyx, kept drawing attention from other project teams at Valve, and it became a rallying cry for the company to all work toward one big project together again. Because, famously, for the most part, everyone at Valve is kind of free to work on whatever project they want as long as, they can justify why it brings value to the company. So, people are working on things that they're passionate about. And, some of you may be talking about pros and cons in your head as far as like what, how this development strategy works, but it did bring them a lot of success for years. However, around this time, it was like, well, you'll notice all those canceled projects I just mentioned, and it was because, those people may have been passionate about the project at the start, but for whatever reason couldn't get it to come together. So Half-Life Alyx was an opportunity for the company to be like, we might need to start changing things up, and that was where they actually got everybody to be really passionate about one project that they could work toward and just finish, right? Just get out the door outside of like some extraneous Steam features that came out during this time.
I guess since then, I don't really count Counter-Strike 2, but since it's just like
I think
update,
Counter-Strike 2 is worth counting. There's a not insignificant amount of work that went into it.
I'm just
whether
saying
or not it means anything to you, but also other games that they put out around this time period would have been Artifact, everyone's favorite.
They did, they pulled
Dota Underlords.
They pulled but they pulled the Overwatch thing where they it's just
Dota
a replacement
2
for the
as
first
well.
game.
Dota 2 was
older,
2013 or 2012.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and then I guess most recently you had that thing that leaked, but that has a name now. What is it? Gridlock. Gridlock is the new game, and they've been working on that since 2018. Listen, I wasn't trying to dog on Counter-Strike, but I'm just saying, that's an update. Well, it's a big one.
Yeah, you're comparing it to Overwatch 2.
They both did the same thing.
No, they didn't.
Counter-Strike
2 isn't on a new engine.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I know they switched engines.
So
Overwatch didn't. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Randy, I know where you're going with this. Okay, so you can no longer, listeners at home, you can no longer play Overwatch 1. That game is completely gone.
Yeah.
And in its place is Overwatch 2. And Counter-Strike 2 is almost exactly that. However,
that's what I was referring to.
You can still play Counter-Strike Go if you go into the beta branches tab on your Steam properties and then roll the game back.
Okay.
And you can even play that LAN. Like, the official servers aren't supporting it anymore, but you can play that with friends if you want to.
Which is a Valve-like solution, but I just mean effectively you can't go on Steam and play
a Valve-like solution. Okay.
We're saying in terms of dedicating manpower to a project.
Yeah. That is
Counter-Strike has a significant. Counter-Strike and Dota have a significant
and they also didn't promise a whole bunch of shit that they just threw into the fire.
I get where you're coming from, but when you're talking about Valve dedicating resources to a project, Counter-Strike 2 is...
But also, a new Valve game should be a big event.
So, this is an interesting point to bring up because younger folks may not remember, but in 2004 to 2011, Valve cranked out W after W. Every game that came out was such a big deal. And that was
staples.
That was 6 years after Half-Life 1, where they were putting together the Source engine, and then once they had the Source engine, they cranked out a bunch of masterpieces in a very short time span. They put out the Orange Box, which was 3 new games
on the same day,
and 2 old ones on the same day in a $50 package.
No, we were spoiled, and I know that's where the expectations.
Yeah, so it's this set just enormous expectations for what a Valve game should be that Randy's still thinking about, even though we just discussed 4 games that they put out in the past 6 years. Which is a pretty rapid clip, but they didn't leave the same impact that those games from the early aughts. And
they're also all live service games.
All of
except
them.
for Alyx.
Alyx is the only one that isn't. You're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alyx is the last one that has that energy.
If CSGO came out in 2012 and then Counter-Strike 2 came out last year, and it wasn't, CSGO didn't stick around that entire time,
maybe that would have felt a little different.
Would have felt a little differently.
Yeah.
The fact that Counter-Strike 2 is the way it is not the same reason that Overwatch 2 is the way it is. It's because Valve wanted to make a new Counter-Strike on the new engine, but they couldn't change Counter-Strike Go because it is one of the most popular games in the world.
Yeah.
So,
With Half-Life Alyx shaping into a reality, Valve wanted to produce essentially a VR 2.0 headset and move beyond restrictions of working with hardware partners. In Valve's eyes, the next step forward was finger tracking, and their next experimental VR hardware was codenamed Knuckles for the way the new controllers circled one's hands.
the echidna?
Sanic.
Exactly, yeah. Idris Elba was working very closely. No. In tandem with the Knuckles controllers, they worked on a new headset with all sorts of bells and whistles called Vader. And having seen prototype images of Vader, I'm guessing they named it that way due to how it looks when it's strapped to your face. Because, boy, you do not look pretty, but it's a prototype, you know.
Yeah, sure. Whatever, I'll take that over the weird Apple, like, projecting your eyes.
Yeah. I saw somebody on a plane using that thing.
Did you really?
Yeah, he was on the seat in front of me.
Smack it out of his hand.
I used it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
On a plane?
you dig it.
I don't know. It
No.
seems like that would be like a one-way trip to throwing up. But
yeah. Certainly a one-way trip to making you look like a jackass.
Yeah, well, you sure did. You sure did. Other than very high-resolution displays, it's unclear what compromises were not made with this device, but ultimately about a year of development time was spent, was somewhat wasted on a product that would have cost $5,000 to sell direct to consumers.
Wait, $5,000?
That's how much they estimated they would have had to charge for what it cost them to make it.
MSRP? Oh,
Yes.
to make it.
No, that's what they estimated they would have to sell it for. Regardless,
To get a profit?
I have no idea what their margins would have been. Just that they were saying, our
Yikes.
analysis is saying we would have to charge $5,000
Yeah,
for
no
this.
wonder why they stepped away from that.
It was a non-starter. So from the ashes of Vader came the Index, Valve's very own VR kit. Though perhaps not as snazzy as Vader's screens, Index boasts higher resolution displays, the Knuckles controllers, a more comfortable headset, and built-in audio with a focus on better simulating audio direction in a 3D space. Full disclosure, I've not used an Index. I still have a Vive. So just, those are my experiences.
Have anybody ever used it at like PAX or anything like that?
No, my brother has an Index, so
really?
that's how he played Alex.
Okay.
So I'm a little jealous because I only got a little bit of a screen door effect on Alex. I was like, I could have used this higher resolution display.
Oh, God, I remember the Oculus One. They called it a screen door effect for a reason because like that was that very, very first model.
Yep. The Index released on June 28th, 2019 at a steep price of about $1,000. Not quite Vader levels, but it was at the price point where, compared to its competitors, this was the VR headset to get if you had some extra money to blow and wanted the best. Valve sold about 50,000 units up front, but demand skyrocketed to hundreds of thousands as soon as Half-Life Alyx was officially revealed. Fortunately and unfortunately,
Killer app.
Half-Life Alyx released in March 2020 to critical acclaim. When the
What else happened that time?
Nothing at all. Everyone was on a staycation.
Doom came out.
And Animal Crossing,
yeah.
and everyone just decided to not go to work for a year and a half. The entire world ran into this thing called the COVID-19 pandemic, disrupting supply chains and making it difficult for them to produce headsets fast enough to meet demand. The Index was a fine piece of technology, released at a premium price point, and did well, all things considered. But for the sake of keeping this episode properly segmented and categorized, we're going to have to, one last time, go back in time to the aftermath of Steam Machines in 2017.
Oh.
Here in the year 2017...
Yeah, you got to set the tone. People are playing PUBG and...
Now remember, this is shortly after the L, where we started our episode on. Here in the year 2017, I'm going to take our story to a more personal destination. Some things were brewing around this time that people came to a lot of conclusions about, but I think they make way more sense in retrospect than they did at the time. Steam Machines had quite demonstrably not been a success. They were not flying off shelves. They were not being promoted anywhere. And Linux ports for big games weren't really getting announced anymore. Like, all those things just dried up. For me personally, though, the combination of indie game releases and the few contracts that port houses like Feral Interactive picked up, combined with a strong distaste for where Windows 10 and a lot of AAA games were headed at the time, led to me finally switching to Linux and keeping up with Linux gaming. And a lot of us Linux gamers, especially on the Linux gaming subreddit, would pay attention to more or less any crumb of information about the health of Linux gaming.
There's dozens of them.
Oh, stop booing. There's nothing wrong with it. There are dozens of us. Dozens!
More than that. I mean, if you want the final number, we can get there toward the end. But due to gaming in general getting bigger over the years, it led to Linux gaming getting bigger as well, but nothing that you would call real growth in a marketplace because it was just growing proportionally.
Yeah.
Despite clearly not being a success, SteamOS was still getting updates, seemingly from a business partner called Collabora, who specializes in open source software. And though SteamOS fans were definitely happy about this, we knew we were a really small audience and had to wonder what financial incentive there was really left to bother with it. Over the next year and change, we saw the slow unraveling of the Steam Machine initiative. The Steam Machine store page link was removed from the main Steam website. The Steam controller and Steam Link were each put on deep clearance level discounts to
$5
to sell through their remaining inventory.
I should have just like bought 5 of them and just gave them out as like stocking stuffers.
I wanted to
I'm gonna link my whole house together.
I wanted to buy another Steam controller, but I only didn't because I thought that meant that a new one was right around the corner. And here we are years later.
I remember people joking around that it was like it was $5 and then it was like $2 to ship it or something. Like it was just so crazy.
It appeared as though Valve had given up, but something strange and interesting was happening, especially with wine. Randy, do you know what wine is? And I mean the software, not the beverage.
Red
Before you
or
got
white?
cheeky with me. I mean the logo's red.
No, I think I might know this one because when we were co-oping games together, I think it is like you're like mimicking Windows kind of to play games for it.
There's one word I'm glad you didn't use, which is emulator, because
I don't think it's an emulator.
Wine literally stands for wine is not an emulator.
Wait, is that true?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
It is a recursive acronym. So basically, and this is why I've seen some analysis on.
You were setting me up to fail. You wanted me to say emulator.
No, listen, this one was easier than,
All right,
than the previous
I was gonna
one.
say I think you called it like a front end or something.
It's a compatibility layer,
Okay.
and so the main difference is the thing that this thing does is it is not trying to recreate a set of hardware the way that an emulator does. Like an NES ROM, when you play it in an emulator, thinks it is running on the actual hardware, right?
Yeah.
Like it is interfacing with APIs that are supposed to call hardware that isn't actually there. Wine doesn't do that. Wine says your hardware is the same hardware. We're just going to make you think your operating system is different. And so anything that it would call in Windows, it instead calls the Wine version, which is all reverse engineered and, clean room, whatever. And yeah, so there's been a lot of analysis lately. I know the industry is in a position where we may be moving over to ARM hardware, which is what was in the Chameleon. It's what's in your phone.
Yes,
it's whatever.
yeah,
it's more energy efficient processor designs, but they're not backwards compatible with what we currently run on x86 64.
Okay.
So it's a problem in the gaming space, and it will be growing pains to get there. But people are like, oh, why not just use a compatibility layer? And like in my mind, I'm not a hardware engineer. I don't know this for a fact, but it certainly sounds like a thing that you can't just solve with a compatibility layer that way. And in fact, Apple is not solving it that way, as they've already made that transition. Instead, what they do is they have a source development kit, which is basically just when you are building software, you just compile it in this thing. And their compatibility layer exists there when you compile it, not when you run it. And that is a big difference because it does mean that you can't just run the software that's already been built. You need to build it again. And so I don't think that kind of compatibility layer can be used for ARM versus x86. This, in the meantime, is a compatibility layer that works because we are running across the same hardware that you would whether you're on Windows or Linux. So, so that is Wine. And
Wine is not an emulator.
Wine is not an emulator. Yeah, another recursive acronym. Okay, so for years, Wine was basically how Linux users played many PC games at all by running those games against your real hardware, not simulating an entire fake machine, but making it think it's running on Windows instead of Linux. And
does it use more like power?
It doesn't have to. And we'll kind of get there.
Yeah.
And in my experience with Wine in the preceding decade, when Linux wasn't my daily driver, but maybe I had it on like a laptop for school. It was a great way to run really old games, but newer games had hardly a prayer of ever working because, Wine was always reverse engineering an older version of Windows, like further in the past, So you could run like Windows 95 games when you were in 2006 or whatever, but like, yeah, it was really rough to run anything better than that. So, but around this time, in 2017, some companion projects started up to work in tandem with Wine, like DXVK and VKD3D. Remember how DirectX? You don't have to memorize this. It won't be on the test.
Some technical jargon.
Do you remember how DirectX had gotten better after the Faster Zombies blog post? So that was because DirectX was getting lower level graphics hardware access, which is basically a necessity for modern games to get good performance. They need to get way down close to the metal.
The zombies got to run fast.
Got to make those zombies run fast. Well, at the time when the zombies were running fast, that low level access didn't really exist in any graphics API. It wasn't a concern yet. So that is a thing that changed in the couple of years between then and when the Steam machines launched, and that really affected their performance because there wasn't
move fast.
there wasn't a Linux equivalent for that,
Yeah.
right? So when you were running it on Windows, they could get down closer to the metal. So that's why you're asking. It's like, does it come with like an increased power cost?
Yeah.
And the answer is the way that they were doing it when Steam machines launched. Yes.
Okay.
The way they're doing it now, maybe not so much.
So
Yeah, Vulkan was the open source software that allowed for the same lower level graphics access, and these new projects were aimed at translating DirectX calls to Vulkan. So now it can theoretically match that performance. And I can't stress enough that being into Linux gaming at this time, there was a subtle acceleration that you could observe in Wine and these sister projects improving. More and more games were working and working really well every month. People suspected, but couldn't prove by any means, that Valve might be behind it because, after all, they're just about the only company with any incentive whatsoever to improve a Windows compatibility layer for Linux, especially as it relates to games. Then around early 2018, changing gears a little bit, an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign caught my attention. The GPD Win 2, which you saw one time.
Yeah.
I intended to have the GPD Win 2 and the Steam Deck here.
I held that thing, yeah.
Both as visual aids, but man, 2 years is a long time to not sell that thing before the value plummets off of a cliff. So,
yeah. I mean, do you have any reason to use that now that you have?
It's completely obsolete at this point, yeah.
Surprised you haven't just like sold it or something.
I did. That's the thing.
Okay.
I was going to sell it after we recorded this episode, and then Austin went and fell into a coma, so I just got impatient. As the 2 implies, it was not their first rodeo, but a small company in China was able to produce a handheld that was running recent PC games like Doom and Grand Theft Auto 5, albeit at low settings. As the Win implies, it was a PC running Windows. It was a big step up over their previous handheld, which had flown under my radar, and as a recent New York City transplant who started relying on public transportation to get around, this could satisfy my gaming needs on the go without the need to repurchase a game that I already owned on Steam in order to play it on the Switch. So the backer price was $650, and I have a lot of reason to believe that it was sold to me more or less at cost. Some of the buttons had some low build quality to them. You did get hands on with it a little bit. It was a while back, but yeah, there's some jank that comes along with the fact that you need to use a keyboard and simulate a mouse from time to time. But overall, it was really impressive.
Yeah.
Mobile CPUs and integrated graphics had advanced far enough that you can make a low power, high performance x64 based PC suitable for running off of battery power. And once I got it in my hands, it hit me. Valve can make one of these things except way better. So with economies of scale, business partners, and experience designing an OS suitable for a controller, Valve could get away with similar or better performance for a similar or better price. And at least a little bit of this was the Linux nerd in me hoping that Steam machines might live on again someday, as realistic as that seemed. Or was it actually unrealistic? Because Steam controllers were discontinued, but it appears that had to do with a patent lawsuit from Corsair having to do with the rear grip buttons.
Wait, what?
Yep, Corsair has a patent on that. Valve was in the process of losing that lawsuit and must have seen the writing on the walls when they cleared out their inventory. Steam Link was discontinued, but since 2015, Parsec and smartphones just turned out to make that device obsolete.
Yeah, that's what we were saying last time. It was just like,
yeah,
it's all been relegated to just apps now.
Yep, and so Valve put out a smartphone app, a smart TV app, and an image for a Raspberry Pi so you could spin up your own Steam Link whenever you wanted, for about the same price, actually. Raspberry Pis are pretty cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Steam machines were quietly swept away from the main view of the public, but did Valve have something bigger in store for their future? One of the biggest problems with the Steam machines was the small library. It was a big ask for the thousands of Steam games to get ported one by one from Windows to Linux, and given that new games were pouring into Steam every day, it would only become a larger mountain to climb as time went on.
You gotta get through those hentai puzzle games somehow.
Oh, yeah, I know. He was going to port all of those. They're going to be too busy jerking off.
They're made on Unity.
Yeah, they had to have a better solution that was easier for developers. Have you guys ever noticed that programs like Discord and Slack exist in web and desktop versions that are basically identical?
This is going.
Yeah.
So-
Now they have console versions.
Well, so yeah, but you'll notice you use Discord, you can use it in the web browser. It looks like the same, like behaves the same, right? But you still, you never followed a web link to Discord?
I have, but it always opens the app.
Yeah, if it detects it, but sometimes it will just route there first.
I'm just trying to. Maybe I used the web one like the first time or something.
That's how it typically goes.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it was
before I downloaded
exactly the same.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because it's built in Electron. And Electron is a framework that allows for an easy development target so that web and desktop clients can both be made uniform. While officially it seems to be so named because it had no resemblance to the word wine and sounded cool, in quotes, people suspect that the easy development target for games that Valve announced in August of 2018 was inspired by Electron. It was called Proton.
I get it.
Valve confirmed that they had been working with code weavers on Proton since 2016, which simultaneously means that they wasted no time after the failure of Steam machines, and also explains why Wine was getting so good so fast. Proton was basically Wine plus these sister projects like DXVK wrapped into a layer that played nice with Steam. Prior to this, launching a Steam game in Wine meant that you had to have a separate Windows version of Steam that you installed and launched through Wine in order to play Windows games. So you had to have your Linux Steam and your Windows Steam back then, and you launched Windows Steam through Wine and then launched the game, and it would launch the game through Wine.
Okay,
it was a major pain. It was not intuitive. Nobody liked doing it. So yeah, Proton initially launched with a small curated whitelist of games that Valve would be officially supporting. They were so confident that these games should work exactly as they do on Windows that they would take it upon their own support staff to walk through any issues if this proved to not be the case. That initial list included games like Beat Saber, Into the Breach, Doom 2, and Tekken 7. Yes, I said Doom 2. Randy just gave me a look. He's like, wait a minute,
do
which
you mean
one?
Eternal?
Nope, I meant Doom 2.
Oh, this predates Eternal. Okay. All right.
It predates Eternal, but that's not the funnier part. My favorite quote about Doom 2 here comes from Ryan Gordon.
John Carmack's head.
Ryan Gordon, notable Linux game porter, who tweeted, "Imagine it being easier to invest years of development in Wine and ship it to every Linux Steam customer than it was to get ZeniMax to upload a Linux build of DOSBox for Doom 2.
Yeah, you can play Doom 2 in a browser because there's sites that
like that game is open source. It is shipped through DOSBox, which is a platform agnostic emulator, and they couldn't be bothered to officially ship it for Linux customers. He's like, wait, really?
On everything.
Yeah,
That's
it's
funny.
exactly. It would have been the easiest thing in the world, but instead, Steam just decided to handle this for everybody. Valve just did this for everyone. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, this will just work on everything because they can't be bothered to upload their own shit. All right. After several years of Proton improvements, we Linux gamers started to wonder, what was Valve's goal with this project? I mean, we were sure happy about it, but it didn't seem to make a lot of business sense. Some Reddit users did the math and found that with the sheer size of Steam, even catering to a small percentage of users could still be profitable relative to the investment it might have cost Valve. Some people did suspect a handheld gaming PC, but most seemed to suspect it was some kind of cloud gaming play, especially given the announcement of Stadia and xCloud.
Yeah.
Me personally, I was about 70-30 on a handheld gaming PC, which is easy to say in retrospect, but I promise it's the truth.
I actually thought it might have been the cloud thing, but
Yeah.
No, I was more on the handheld gaming PC thing.
Yeah.
I remember, yeah.
Finally, in the summer of 2021, after briefly leaking as the Steam Pal, it was confirmed in a media blitz that Valve was making the SteamDeck.
that sounds more like PAL sounds a little childish.
Well, I mean, I could see a Game Boy correlation.
I know.
You
It's cute. I'm just saying, the Steam Deck feels more like.
I believe they officially named their little anthropomorphized cartoon Steam Deck character. I think they named him the Steam Pal.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's a neat little callback. The device was impressive right off the bat. Preview coverage was positive, with one eyebrow raised at how this device seemed too good to be true. They began to ship in early 2022, and reviews were largely positive, especially from the outlets that are more focused on the sheer possibility of it as a piece of tech. But notable grievances included that the software experience of it is very much in flux, the battery life is low on high-end games, the fan is loud and high-pitched on demanding games. Personally, I never experienced that one. Your mileage may vary, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's like my some people's PS5s are super quiet, and some people's mine sounds like a jet engine. So.
Yeah, and there's more software jank involved than you would find on a typical handheld console, from the likes of Nintendo.
Sure.
But as Valve are sure to point out at every opportunity, this is a PC. You can do whatever you want with it. It's an open platform that they'll give you every opportunity to mess with if you're so inclined. The first comparison people were sure to make was to the Nintendo Switch, since Valve themselves demoed this device as being able to dock and then output to a TV or computer monitor.
And this is also around the time the Switch is.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah, I mean, the Switch is, at this point in time, still immensely dominant, even though the hardware feels like it came from the Paleolithic era.
Yeah.
So, despite some Q&A videos showing design drawings in the background that indicated that they clearly played with the concept of detachable side controllers, Valve insists that the desire for handheld PC gaming has been there for way longer than the Switch, but the technology for low-energy performant processors finally caught up. So even though this is still a SteamOS-powered device, is this just a repeat of Steam machines? What do you guys think? This is clearly more successful than Steam machines, but which differences do you think had the most impact? Which ones do you think were maybe inconsequential or whatever?
Okay, so it's funny because I remember when this got announced and officially, and we knew what it was, and I thought it was going to be successful. mostly because it's like you can target it as a companion device for people like once you're not at home at your computer. But also I think everybody's perception of like I think the Switch actually like fueled it even though it is a competitor. Like it's like
Well, we know how many people who got a Switch so they could play Hades in bed, you know?
yeah,
And it's like,
and it's funny because
and it's a worse
we
version
know
of
people
Hades.
have multiple Switches. It is, and everything in the Switch is a worse version of like where it is to get elsewhere. But
Yeah.
it's like a thing. I'm coming from a weird place because portable gaming doesn't interest me much. Like my Switch is pretty much always in the dock. With the rise of people gaming on smartphones and on Switch, it's like then this seems obviously incredibly appealing. It's like.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's...
But if you're saying what made people have more faith in this hardware and not this other hardware, I mean, they had people in the press come out and play it, and
I can tell you
that was all very
exactly what
positive.
it was.
Yeah.
It was made by Valve.
That I do think that is a big contributing factor. You've got now it wasn't just one SKU because even now they're at like 5 SKUs that are marginally different.
This is before the OLED. There were 4, right?
Yeah, but well,
No, there were 3.
there
Oh,
were
there were
3.
3.
And
yeah.
there were 4 technically of the OLED. One of them was limited edition. So
Which one do you have?
I have the big boy from the initial run, which is
Is this one of the ones that
Oh yeah, so
Keeley had to
Randy.
give out because Christopher Judge talked too long?
Yeah, no, it's not one of those, but it was from the same time. So I've Randy's got my Steam Deck in front of him as a visual aid because Austin and I both have one, and I just wanted Randy to get hands on as we're talking about it.
I've held one before, and it's so ergonomic.
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is something like it's a little heavy, but
And not your first experience with it, but just
Fun
for
fact,
yeah.
I bought this thing while you're looking at that. I bought this thing because I have a problem.
Yeah.
And
we're here for you.
Yeah. But I remember buying it and being like, this is kind of a dumb purchase. And then I went into a coma 2 weeks after I got shipped to me.
So now who's smart, huh?
Yeah. Turned out to be a lifesaver.
the one thing that's really
That and
interesting
the medicine and the doctors.
about it is
Well, after that, when I was still in the hospital bed, but alive, it was a lifesaver.
and this isn't even a criticism, this is just an observation that similar to the Switch, because I thought about this when the Switch came out too, these are not pocket devices, and nor are they being billed as such.
No.
But I do think
They are handheld.
They are handhelds, yes.
There is, let me tell you, as someone who just took a train this weekend, there is a dramatic difference between trying to play a laptop on the train, like trying to play a game on a laptop, and playing one of these. This is so much better for that use case. It's laughable to try to suggest otherwise.
For starters, I will say they went with matte. There's no fucking gloss. This still looks like you bought it yesterday, as opposed to other consoles that don't. But I do like the handles that's so huge. I don't understand why the Switch never had the Joy-Cons with like
this came out later, to be fair, and I do think
right, but they've iterated on the Switch multiple times. Why didn't they just like?
because they're gonna have a Switch 2 to sell you in a couple months.
But it's like that. I feel like everybody in this group has probably dropped their Switch because of how like weird.
Also, the
it is to
Joy-Cons are
hold and-
detachable, so third parties handled that. You can get.
I know. I have seen that.
And I do think, like, okay, so for folks at home, what we're talking about is that the grips, right where you hold the Steam Deck, they are very ergonomic, and the rest of the Steam Deck is pretty flat. So this provides a couple advantages. For one, when you lay it down on a table, it means that the heat vents are not covered up.
Oh, that's smart.
For another one, it means that the heat generating parts in the device are in the middle away from your hands.
Are the touch? I like that they're touch boxes now because they're smaller, but you're holding it. It makes sense. Do these don't click in anymore?
They do.
They do.
They
Yeah.
do? Okay.
They don't click in. They use haptics to make it feel like you're clicking.
Oh,
in.
gotcha. So you get the
Yeah.
feedback that it's,
You get a it feels like a click,
but
but it's like 3D touch on the iPhone.
So
shockingly good D-pad. I like.
Oh, yeah.
But
D-pad's
obviously
confident.
the trigger's much better than the Steam controller. Joysticks.
Also,
better.
there's haptics on top of the analog sticks.
Yeah.
yeah,
My only complaint at all is that it's just a little heavy, and I understand why. But I mean, it's better than the Wii U gamepad that feels like a Fisher-Price toy. But
yeah. So
I prefer the heaviness of that to the lightness of the Switch.
Yeah.
It feels more premium.
it does.
the big thing with the
Is the
Switch for
screen
me
bigger?
than the Switch,
Yeah.
by like a little bit, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like the big thing with me for the Switch
It's also
is that
16 by 10, not 16 by
That's what.
9.
Yeah, that's why it's
the Switch.
like wider.
The Switch is very boxy compared to this. In that, like,
Yeah.
because it doesn't have those grips. Like these grips on where you put your hands.
Yeah.
are so important to how good this thing feels to hold.
It does. It feels really good.
Basically, I think you'd be an idiot for it if you're making a handheld game device that doesn't have a design like this going forward. And I think Nintendo also realizes where most of their third-party Switch, Joy-Cons are coming from. It is solving that problem.
All the hoary and...
So I do think Switch 2 is probably going to...
I think the best evidence for the success of the Steam Deck is the fact that one sign begets another. The fact that every PC manufacturer under the sun is now making their version.
Yep.
We talked about this.
Yeah,
before the
ROG
episode,
Ally and
the ROG Ally, the MSI Claw, the Lenovo Legion Go,
there's the Aya,
the Aya
line.
Neo,
yeah, GPD. Like I was saying, they still do their thing.
GDP Win 4,
Jeez.
yeah.
I haven't even heard of some of these.
Yeah.
Some of them are just out of China and they're doing it on a shoestring budget
the
by
Aya,
comparison.
the Aya Neo and GDP are out of China, but specifically the ROG Ally and the Lenovo Legion Go, which are the ones I've seen, is like their gimmicks are when you come out with a successful product and you have a bunch of copycats and their gimmicks make the product worse or their gimmicks are useless.
Yeah.
Because there's no discernible problem to be solved from your product. I think that's a good sign of success. The ROG Allies
if people want to rip you off.
The ROG Allies only gimmick really that some people would see as a positive is that it runs Windows. But because it runs Windows,
no, it's got a little more horsepower and
it does have
a higher resolution screen.
People have since figured out though.
but it has higher horsepower and it has a high resolution screen. Both of those things make the battery life worse.
It's true.
Also,
Very
Windows it doesn't perform as well. Like the gap of like Windows, the better horsepower in the processor versus the overhead of Windows kind of evens out from what I've seen. And then the Lenovo Legions, they just made it a switch where you can detach the things, and that led to a bunch of issues.
Also, I mean, now more and more companies are putting their games on Steam, but people have figured out how to play BattleNet stuff.
I did that. All you have to do is you have to install the BattleNet installer. You have to add the BattleNet installer as a Steam game so that when you click on when you install BattleNet, it installs through Proton, and then you can run BattleNet and install other games.
My favorite thing about the Steam Deck, and that without even owning one, it's been greatly improving my gaming in the past few years, because now almost every release is conscious of controller support. Because
that's the crazy thing. I was talking to Andrew about this,
and the Steam Link has really excelled that, even in indie games and everything.
I was talking to Andrew about this before, and you've constantly said you like the Steam Deck, but you aren't the target market because you don't play handhelds.
Yeah.
But your Switch stays in the dock, and it's you have a room with a TV and your computer, and then you have a room with a projector and the consoles. If you got a Steam Deck, you could dock that and play multiplayer stuff.
That's true.
Because that's what I do with my Steam Deck. Now that I'm not in the hospital and I don't travel all that much, it's basically just a way to play Steam games on a TV.
Especially, we have the projector in the other room, which is the opposite side of the house of my computer, and it's if I want to play... whatever, Speedrunners or Ultimate Chicken Horse, or these shared screen Crawl, and it's all right, then I could just take it over there.
You would benefit more from having a Steam Deck than you think you would. Also,
maybe I didn't think about that.
It's more powerful than your Steam machine was.
Oh yeah,
by a wide margin.
By a wide margin.
So the casual estimates here.
Do they make their own dock or just anybody?
They did, but it's also an open spec, so
it doesn't really matter.
I have one unofficial dock that also works for smartphones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I have the official dock permanently plugged in at home.
Okay.
So if I'm out and about and I need my portable
they
monitor,
got to be cheaper than the $90 Switch one that scratches your screen.
Not
also,
by as much as you think.
Okay.
Also, the Valve one is $70, which is cheaper than a Switch dock, but not by much. But a lot of companies make them now. Yeah. The one I have is made by Anker, who's a really good company.
So the other one that I have is by the one I bring with me. That one's also made by Anker. Yeah.
Yeah, and that thing rules. It has you plug it into the USB-C port. It has a USB-C port for power that can do high power delivery of that USB-C, 90 watts, so it can charge pretty fast. It has USB-C for data. It has two USB-A's for data. It has an extra SD card slot. So you could have like games installed specifically for when it's docked, and then it also has an HDMI port.
And keep in mind too, like some of these
And
features,
people also go pretty crazy with emulation and stuff.
I do too.
It's just unfortunately I'm not the target audience of anything anymore because I don't have any money.
No, but like,
Well, yeah.
the benefit of what
I keep trying to win one at the Game Awards.
the
Me
benefit
neither.
of what
Me
Austin's
neither.
talking about, right, is like this is another thing back to the open standards, is that it's like because of this, like think about any other console. Would you ever get a peripheral that'll be like, oh yeah, and also it allows you to expand your storage without buying their proprietary stuff? Nobody does that. Xbox is like, yeah, we'll let you slot in another SSD, but it's going to cost you like $260 or something,
yeah.
right?
Switch does
Seagate
that.
ones.
Switch has SD card slot.
It has an SD card slot, but it doesn't have a dock that lets you like put in other one. There are custom docks for the Switch, but it's not really like it's not built to the same
Listen,
standard that my phone uses.
Listen, this podcast will be an hour long if you let me complain about Nintendo's violation of USB-C standards. There's a reason why when people started making third-party Switch
Oh,
docks,
it's like bricking them?
It was bricking Switches because Nintendo
That's-
didn't follow USB-C standards, and the people who made the off-brand third-party docks followed USB-C standards better than Nintendo did.
And it's also worth mentioning about this thing, right? So this thing is generally the power of, let's say, a PS4, PS4 Pro-ish, but with some concessions there, especially when it comes to like resolution. So like the hardware that they put in this thing is exactly the right hardware for the job of a portable system, but that also means that it's like if you're trying to run PS4 era games at like 1080p, it might start to struggle a little bit there.
I mean, there is a rumor going around right now that Microsoft is working on their own as well, and I'm sure in like a year we're going to listen back and be like,
It should also be noted that when I don't know if this is in your script or
it's before the OLED happened?
no.
Okay, so remember Andrew
when
had to go back
They
and...
made a partner deal with iFixit. Yeah. Every part that is in the Steam Deck is available for purchase on a partner website so that you can repair it
that's
or
real
upgrade
right
it
to the-
yourself.
And iFixit is trained in how to do it, so that's like it's a more open repair process than
Yes.
going through a warranty
So
program.
it
Like,
could
Or
still-
you could just buy the part yourself and fix it.
So it could-
and people have made
Would it still behoove you if you bought like the model with less storage and then just put your own
Yes.
storage? Wow.
some people do that. They do have a video where they open it up and they're like, some of this stuff is no joke. Like when you're messing with a battery,
it's probably very
they're like-
compact in there. And
they're
you don't
like-
want to fuck it up.
Well, yeah, they're like, listen, you should probably not be doing any of this, but some of you are going to anyway, so we're going to show you what it is.
Okay.
Keep in mind,
because you can't stop them.
it is dangerous to work around a lithium battery. So they preface all of it with that, and they're like, you should probably go to a
Right, but
professional
like-
if you're not
Yeah,
sure.
I don't think this is the same as replacing the Joy-Con. Like
one of the downsides compromises
he
of this,
did air
It'd be a
quotes.
big
I
Everyone
did
at
air
home.
quotes. One of the compromises of the Steam Deck is that it's not a 1080p panel. It's 16 by 10.
so people are
it's
upgrading their own screens.
It's 800p, but people have made higher resolution screens that you can swap out yourself, but then your battery life suffers because higher
that's kinda
resolution
doing it.
screens,
Yeah.
screens with better brightness. Now that the OLED's a thing, that's not really a problem anymore. If you get the OLED one, it has
Yeah.
better brightness.
Oh,
but
I wonder if there's going to be. They're still cooking like new models. Keep
They
the
are.
train rolling.
they are.
So
yeah.
the thing is like it's also worth mentioning. This thing launched at $400 on
Yep.
the low end. It is now cheaper through a refurb program and older versions of it. But like, yeah, the initial cheap.
How much was yours?
Mine was $550. No, or was it $600? I forget. It was like
$650?
It was $400, $550, $650. So I had $650.
Okay, I paid $550.
Yeah. Okay.
So what was the difference between
64 gigs, 256 gigs, 512 gigs.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Besides that,
That's
it.
No,
Okay.
there's an etched screen on that one, so it's anti-glare.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
that one's anti-glare. Mine is just 64. It's also
But otherwise, the Eternals, the
400
power is the
Yep.
same.
Yep.
the 400 was flash memory, 64 gigs flash memory. The 550 was
Okay.
256 gigs solid state memory, and then that one has an etched screen.
Oh,
and-
okay, I didn't realize they were. It was flash memory and solid state. That's
Yeah, well,
significant.
that was how they got the cost down on that
Low time.
$400.
Sure,
one.
and then
And-
yeah,
and
it is $150.
They did say in an interview $400 was painful, which
Yeah.
we don't know if that means that they were selling it at a loss. They just knew that they had to
Maybe
hit $400.
you just want that SKU, even though everybody I know that has one has the upper one models because
But
it's
they weren't expecting the upper
looks
models to
appealing.
sell that much
It should
better.
also
Yeah.
be stated that that model still exists and it's $350 now.
Yeah, through the refurb program, I think. Or maybe
No,
that's-
I think it's just the old. They didn't
Oh,
sell
okay.
all the old. They didn't sell through the cheapest version of the old ones.
yeah.
So the OLED, I think
Kind of
only has
replaced it.
2. And then the lowest model is still the non-OLED screen with the flash memory, but it's $350 now instead of $400. And then I think you can get it lower through the refurb
See,
program.
that's the one I would actually go for. I just wanted to dock and play,
Sure.
like multiplayer.
And it would be
games.
good at that.
And as somebody who
Jackbox and-
has somebody who owns one, I have the 256 gig model. I have another 256 gig flash drive in it, and I could not tell you. I do not know when a game loads from one versus the other. It's
Yeah,
Oh, really?
the performance-
it's negligible.
It's very, very negligible. Yeah.
yeah.
So keep in mind that $400 price point. That is like a fraction of its closest competitors at the time.
Yeah.
So stuff like the Ioneo Pro, Ioneo Next, and GPD Win 3, it was about a third to half of its next closest competitor.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's like it's a massive difference, and like they may have outdone it on specs a little bit, but they're still also running Windows. Which, you know, my feelings on Windows aside, the problem with running anything that isn't SteamOS, even other versions of Linux on these things, is that these operating systems are designed for a keyboard and mouse. They will lose focus from the game controller, and like interfaces will just get screwed up as you're trying to update or whatever, and the Steam Deck solves that so well that it does feel like a console almost all the time.
Asus has been
That's what I like.
making strides, I've heard. The ROG Ally 2 came out, and I've heard that they've done some work, but it's still not as good as the Steam Deck.
I mean, as long as it's running Windows, I think it's still going to run into that same problem. And even Phil Spencer knows that and is publicly
Also-
acknowledging it, which is why people are pretty confident that they are, in
Yeah.
fact, working on that handheld.
Also,
Of course.
the ROG Ally, which is, I would say, its closest competitor now,
Mhm.
I think is $700 at its cheapest.
Mm-hmm.
So $350 is still half of that.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other things, too, which we hinted at a little bit, we did note that the worst performance on the Steam machines really hampered it, as well as the library problem. Well, you know, there's now a verified Proton program where Proton will, you know, if Valve has vetted it themselves and find it to
says
be
in the store.
just as good as the Windows experience, you'll be able to get all the controller prompts working. It should just work like a console, or so they say. I'm going to put an asterisk on that. We'll come back to it. But that will have the verified green check mark. If it is just shy by a few features, like maybe the text is too small on a handheld screen or whatever, it will get the playable rating.
Or partially.
And also the Vulkan translation layers that exist in Proton have closed that performance problem gap, right? Like Vulkan really did just solve that problem that we didn't have for Steam machines. And in fact, a lot of cases, if it runs the game at all, it will run, you know, single digits of percentages better than the Windows version, as opposed to running 20% worse.
Right.
You know, which is a massive
There
difference.
are very rare cases where games are directly designed for DirectX 12 and will run a little bit better, I've heard.
Yeah, sometimes it's going to depend on it. Like we'll get into all like we're in slightly more advanced user territory at that point. But if you just have a Steam Deck and you get something with the green check mark on it, it's probably going to run just
You
like a
have
console
nothing
game.
to worry about, yeah.
Yeah. So while Proton got them so far into nearly universal Windows game compatibility, two major roadblocks stood between them and that goal: anti-cheat and Windows formatted video. Coming in extremely hot around the launch of the Steam Deck. Accommodations for anti-cheat were still being made right up to and after the launch of Steam Decks.
Okay. You mean anti-cheat, not like DRM or whatever. Like,
it can run into problems with DRM too for the most part.
like, can you play Valorant on a Steam Deck?
Nope.
No.
Really?
Nope.
Is that because of the anti-cheat?
We'll get there.
Okay.
Valorant doesn't run on Steam.
Yeah, it doesn't. We'll get there in like 2 seconds
Riot
here.
has their own launcher.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
For the most popular games out there, Easy Anti-Cheat and BattleEye are often the anti-cheat solutions used, and Valve did everything in their power to work with these companies to make these solutions play nicely with Proton. But this is an opt-in solution for developers to do, and a good handful choose not to.
Why?
Well, listen, this is a much longer discussion, and it's a little bit of a technical one. So, games like even Easy Anti-Cheat is owned by Epic, I'll say, okay? And so it's used in Fortnite.
I know BattleEye's on like a lot of Ubisoft games.
Yeah, and I forget which one Destiny uses. Do you remember?
Not Easy Anti-Cheat.
It might be BattleEye, but in either case, or it might be their own. In either
I think
case,
it's their own.
I know that Destiny 2 and Fortnite specifically opted out of making that compatibility.
Not only that, but when Steam Deck came out, Bungie came out and said, if you launch Destiny 2 on Steam Deck and get it to work, we will ban you.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. And there This is not based in superstition or anything. This is based on something real, I'll say, right? Is that there are ways to inject cheats into the game when you are running your anti-cheat the way that Proton runs it. But I'm also going to say no anti-cheat actually works 100%. Yeah. And a lot of the methods that games like Valorant do use are literally rootkits, like the worst security compromise you can make on your computer. And those, if it's a rootkit that works on Windows, it will never work on Linux unless they port the anti-cheat to Linux. Then you have to get Linux nerds to install a rootkit, and good luck.
Why the fuck would, they'll never.
Yeah.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite thing when the TikTok ban went through.
Yeah.
They were talking about that, and the people were like defending and being like, look, I get it. You hate TikTok. You don't like Zoomers. You think that they're annoying. But this is horrible language for a bill. It just says that they can ban any app that a foreign adversary controls.
I knew that, yeah.
And then everybody was like, TikTok sucks. And then somebody came out and was just like, Valorant runs a rootkit on your computer, and they are mostly owned by Tencent. Yeah. So this bill could ban Valorant and League like that.
Double win. No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
No. That's why I said no. Jokes aside, that's incredibly fucked.
Yeah.
And we won't even make the obvious joke of like, well, it's okay if we steal your data, but we don't. Yeah.
But that's kind of it, right? Like a lot of these games,
we're gonna collect all the information from you, and
a lot of these games do operate on this principle of we want to stop cheating, so we have the solution that's marginally better at it that is a huge compromise to your security. Yeah. Those will never work on Steam Deck, and some that could. The one game that I would want to play online that did not ever enable this, and it might just be because they're running on an older version of Easy Anti-Cheat, is Dragon Ball FighterZ. Like, it's so funny. Like, before this Proton thing happened, there were 2 Linux fighting games. It was Skullgirls and Fantasy Strike, and now it is all of them except for Dragon Ball FighterZ.
Interesting. Yeah. But are other Arxis games?
Yeah, they all. Dragon Ball FighterZ is the only one that has anti-cheat on it because you typically don't need anti-cheat for a fighting game.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, what is they just Street Fighter and MK and like
they don't have any.
Tekken. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So
they really thought that Dragon Ball was gonna have a problem.
I mean, that could have been Bandai Namco's decision, and then they just didn't make it for Tekken for some reason. I don't know. But in any case, yeah. So it is anti-cheat is one big hurdle. And the other big one is Windows formatted video files, which I've talked to you guys a bit about lately.
I ran across that with I tried to play Her Story.
Yep.
On my Steam Deck, and it didn't work.
You told me about
that.
That.
So most game engines kind of default to like a Windows formatted video codec.
Yeah.
And that is just something that your operating system inherently knows how to read when you're running Windows. It just comes with it. But Valve can't legally distribute the DLL that decodes that stuff. So what can they possibly do? Are they going to convince everyone to re-encode their videos in another format? Nah, that's going to be too much of an uphill battle. So instead, this is something I would say is a very Valve-like solution, which is they just realized, wait a minute, we host all these files on our servers. So what if every time we find out that a video tried to play and couldn't, we put a flag on our server to queue up a job to re-encode that video into a compatible format that will run on Steam Deck? So yeah, they are actually re-encoding videos server side and then sending you the re-encoded ones when you are running it on SteamOS or Proton.
Like, how many games were affected by that?
Oh,
a lot.
So many, dude.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Tons have had it happen to them, but they were just invisible to people playing on Steam Deck because it had already been done server side.
Okay.
And in my case, I have run into it a couple times lately. Austin already mentioned Her Story not long ago.
Which, didn't you say like the videos couldn't play, but you could hear the audio from it or something? Yeah,
exactly. Because it's the video part of the codec that doesn't work. And so...
And Immortality worked flawlessly, by the way.
Really? So by then, Sam Barler was like...
No, not even.
No, Valve did it.
Valve did it. Okay, that's...
And you know what may have happened? Like, maybe Her Story got a patch, and then the video file re-uploaded, and then they never re-encoded it, or something like that. But they are mostly doing this automatically in the background.
Yeah.
And when
Her Story predates the Steam Deck. Immortality doesn't.
When it doesn't work, Valve may have legal obligations to not distribute that DLL, but that doesn't mean that enterprising users can't figure out an advanced solution to get around it. So that is a solvable problem with, let's say, some other versions of Proton. Thank you to Glorious Egg Roll. That is a username on GitHub.
There's been a lot of crazy names for the last 2 episodes. You could have told me that was anything.
Yeah.
You didn't download the crazy egg roll. What was it? Crusty egg roll?
Glorious Egg Roll.
Glorious Egg Roll. This is way better.
It's such a good username.
Yeah.
But yeah, Glorious Egg Roll's version of Proton is fantastic. Props to him. So, there are sites that can calculate how much of your Steam library has been verified or playable. And as of the time of this recording, and this is updated fresh last night,
give us some math.
70% of my library of 991 games has already been evaluated as either verified or playable, with 295 verified and 394 playable.
What's the website?
Check my deck.
So give me a short list of examples that, or maybe in that 30% part. Like,
all right, so I'm scrolling down, and these are listed in this site. This Check My Deck.
Yeah.
To just get an at-a-glance view. It's listed by when the last update to the game's compatibility was made.
Okay.
So when
it could be some of these that just didn't go back in and flip a switch or something.
Well, what happens is that Valve evaluates it as verified or whatever, and then the developer can contest it and say we made changes to do it better.
Because I'm going to guess some of these are probably older games.
A lot of them are. So Penny's Big Breakaway is verified. Enshrouded is unsupported, and it's unsupported only because this game's graphics settings cannot be configured to run well on SteamDeck. So that's one of them. Like everything else on the software layer, it's doing fine.
Can you still brute force that?
Starfield, same reason. Can you brute force the performance? No, that's just the hardware.
No. You just open it anyway and just see how it.
Oh yeah, they're not going to stop you from doing any of that.
No, all right. Well, that's what I was going to say. Like,
it is a computer.
When you're talking about the anti-cheat stuff, that you can't play it. Like,
correct.
But
Well, you can't. Sometimes you can boot it in a single player mode and not online, depending on the game.
Oh, sure. Maybe you're at a main menu, but it's like, it's a thing of being like, if in the event of like, oh, this is too powerful for the, then just try anyway.
73% of 1,200 games for
Right.
me.
That seems to be about the average then.
Yeah, so there is
we have two like
there's going to be selection bias in here because if you just look at all games on Steam, the percentage of verified is going to be much lower because they don't rate a lot of garbage. The way that they prioritize what they're verifying or not is based on how many people own it, how many people wishlist it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh wait, here's a stupid question. Does it automatically say unsupported for every VR game you own?
Yes.
Okay, so that could be a good.
But it is a thing they've been actively working on because if you'll recall from that whitelist for the early Proton games, Beat Saber was on the list. Like they want VR to be compatible with SteamOS. They're just not there yet.
My two most recent unsupported ones are the Rogue Prince of Persia because it's still in early access. Just came out. They said it can't run its settings. And an interesting one, Remnant 2 is listed as unsupported, which is an update because it was verified at one point and now says the game's graphics settings cannot be configured. I guess they updated it and then it ran worse, so they...
So a lot of these, too, will be games where they checked it and one thing didn't work, and then they just said Valve is still working on adding support for this game on Steam Deck. A lot of them say that. So
I mean, sure, like you said,
Kane and Lynch Dead Men has that rating on it. Chronicles of Riddick Assault on Dark Athena has that rating. Like a lot
games from that era.
Well, no, it's just whatever they checked it, one thing didn't work, and then they're like, okay, this thing didn't work, so what can we change about Proton and Wine and DXVK and all that other stuff? What can we change about that to make this thing work and make it work for dozens of other games at the same time? And then they'll come back around and check a couple of them, one at a time. So that's generally how that works.
I should also mention that of this...
That's interesting.
In addition to this saying I have 1,200 games or whatever, in addition to not counting VR games, it also doesn't count games that are dead.
Yep.
A lot of my library is dead.
Oh.
So it'll be like...
I had Firefall in my list.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, you can't play this free. You can't play this free-to-play game that's offline. It's like, okay.
Defiance.
Yeah.
So yeah, because they are tracking things like how many people own it and how many people have wishlisted a game, they know when a new hot release is coming out, and
they can get on it.
Well, and they can work. They
can
work with those developers before the game comes out to try to get it verified. And some of the ones that they've done that for, and boy, this list is old because I wrote it 2 years ago. Is God of War, for Forza Horizon 5, and Elden Ring. So that they are verified on Steam Deck as soon as possible.
I'll give you a more recent example. The early access version of Hades 2 was verified on Steam Deck.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And also,
that makes sense. You'd have
the Kingdom Hearts collection that just came out recently, also verified on Steam Deck.
Oh, the game that's hitting PC for the first time.
Yeah, after 3 years trapped in epic hell.
So
it just made me laugh because you and my roommate Jimmy did the exact same thing, and you're like, I bought it on Steam, and you're like, didn't you have it on? It's like, yeah, but I bought it on Steam.
I didn't buy it on Epic. I just own it on PS2.
No, I thought you did own it on Epic because they were giving it away at free one day. I think. Okay.
So Elden Ring notoriously launched with some pretty shoddy Windows performance when that game first came out.
Wait, which game?
Elden Ring.
Oh. Really?
Yep.
Okay.
It was very stuttery, especially when you got into like the high wind area early on. Yeah. So because Valve is translating DirectX calls to Vulkan calls on the fly, they've even admitted via Twitter that they're able to intercept some of these inefficiencies in Elden Ring and fix performance stutters in Proton and or the open source AMD drivers, whether FromSoft fixes them or not. So, and they could just look at this and be like, oh, they're trying to do this DX12 feature, but they're doing it really badly. So what if we just made an exception for this game where it does it the right way instead, and then performance is way better? So when you were playing that game on SteamDeck at launch, you were having a better experience than you were on Windows.
That's hilarious.
I can verify.
I can verify.
Are they prepared for the DLC?
Well, at this point, Elden Ring's being patched up, but
It
that
runs
was
like a dream now.
yeah, that was an experience back then. I was like, wow, I get to actually play this game better than you guys on Windows. Yeah.
That's pretty dumb.
So, and Elden Ring was so successful for From Software on SteamDeck that they made sure to target it officially for Armored Core 6. Some developers are doing that, and that doesn't mean that they're making a Linux version necessarily. Maybe someday they will, if that's how they, can really fine-tune what they're doing.
We're turning all these people and working in Japan that like their heads upside down with this.
They only just found out that people play PC games like 10 years ago, as for SteamOS itself, the major improvement made, if you'll recall, that Steam Comp MGR that I pointed out in the last episode, that evolved into GameScope, which preserves that console-like functionality with some extra added functionality like resolution scaling, frame rate limiting, power management, all sorts of other stuff.
You can read your memory card.
It's like, they're still making improvements to that. I think the one glaring omission I had from like what I would expect out of a console that Steam Deck is doing is if we are connected with a Bluetooth controller at home, it won't tell you the battery life that's left on it. But if you go to desktop mode, the desktop environment that's left underneath that is called KDE, and KDE is aware of how much battery life is left on the controller. Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like now it is a beta feature as of when we were recording that the gaming mode will have the battery life.
Fucking controller still conveys that information better than all of them is the 360 controller, where not only does it tell you what player you are, but it spins around when the battery's dying.
Yep. And that's a good point. There's another thing that SteamOS does really well with this.
Grabs your attention.
Is that they virtually map all your controllers so you can reorder them very easily. It's actually it's better than consoles in some ways.
I don't. It's funny. I don't know why they changed that with the Xbox One and Series S, but I will say when we played 8-player Quake split screen, beautiful chaos. Connecting 8 controllers was pretty seamless. I think that we fumble around with Joy-Cons when we try and play
Nintendo's
Switch games.
Nintendo's second place. Sony's the worst at connecting multiple controllers.
Yeah.
Xbox is the best in the console space.
Yeah. I feel like Sony used to be better
but
at
also
that.
They're all fucking bad at showing you how much battery life is left.
Yeah.
Try every time I'm playing it's such a bummer moment when I'm playing a PS5 game and it's like, boop, your battery's dying.
Yeah.
And it's not like your battery's dying, charge it in an hour.
Yeah.
It's like your battery's dying.
Dead. Yeah.
It's going to turn off in 3 minutes. I hope you can pause.
Yeah.
One major advantage that Valve gets from building the Steam Deck on their own Linux OS rather than Windows, other than the fact that they get to save paying for Windows on every single unit sold, is there's something that Windows has historically been very bad at for games, which is putting your computer to sleep and then waking it in the middle of a game, which is something that new consoles do pretty gracefully these days. Yeah. And when it turns out that when you have access to your entire operating system, you can put that into a Linux OS too.
Yeah.
So
I think I just set my computer to never. It's just on 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and I think that is what by way of what works well and what doesn't work well on Windows. That is what a lot of us have been trained to do.
Yeah.
So it turns out that this putting this entire machine to sleep and waking it and having the game still running and not only that, but waking from sleep very quickly is something that the Steam Deck is really good at. In fact, if you were to open that up and just tap the power button, I'll still be in the middle of Animal Well right now.
Hey, really?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do this real-time experiment.
Yeah. That's the thing where it's like, if you're on a Windows version of this, you don't have access to that feature because that game is going to crash when you wake it from sleep.
That's true.
Yeah. Power button's on your right. Just tap it.
Yeah.
There it is.
That was lickety-split.
Yep. And just tap it again. There you go.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep.
I hate to keep dogging on Sony, but the
Oh, and by the way, the
but
Switch does this really well too, but the difference is the Switch isn't a Windows machine.
there's a lot of things about the PS5 that I love, but they're weird. Like hold this button to do this, and it's different than it was on the PS4, and I do it wrong every time.
No, you don't hold it anymore. You used to hold it. Now you tap it.
Now you tap, but also you were. I've owned this console since it came out. You were over the other day, and I was like, oh, let me go turn this off, and I hit the disc eject thing again because I was like, just label them. It's fucking stupid. So yeah, that reminded me. That's like the quick resume thing on the series. Like that's
exactly
that's nice.
But
the Switch takes some.
That feature is so much handier on a handheld though, because
yeah.
So
I mean, if you like you said, you're on a bus or something, and you're like,
there have been times like when I was on the GPD Win 2 before this thing came out, and which I enjoyed that thing for like 4 years before the Steam Deck arrived. Yeah. If I was nearly done a game and I knew I was like a stop away on the train, I'd have to like start shutting the thing down when I'm like one stop away. Right. But with this, I just tap the sleep button when I get to my stop, and it's like I could be playing Psychonauts 2 again like seconds later. Yeah. Like, that actually happened. It was like, oh right, I'm at my stop, but wait a minute, I could just put this thing to sleep.
That was at 98% in sleep mode, which is like Dude, when the Switch is in sleep mode, it's still just dreams.
I mean, this will still shoot your battery in a similar way.
I'm not. I didn't mean to come off like a sales pitch. It's just like I was more impressed by that. Just because
they're all going to slowly drain battery in that way, but
all the electronics in my house are dying.
But it does it as well as you could reasonably expect it to do, which is very impressive.
Yeah.
So that's what they ended up. They migrated, in my opinion, the best feature from previous SteamOS to the new feature, which is this much more robust thing that does all kinds of console-like functionality, whereas the other one just did that one very specific thing of making sure that you keep your game window active and you still have access to a console-like menu.
Yeah.
They've also put effort into a project called Pressure Vessel.
Pressure.
Steam.
I was slightly behind on that one.
And that should help to ensure that Linux games on Steam always have the dependencies that they need in order to function properly. So that way there's not like, oh yeah, some small program that it relies on got updated and now it's like out of sync with this game that is never going to get updated again. Yeah. That solves that problem. Then on November 9th, 2023, Valve announced the SteamDeck OLED, which we've been talking about liberally thus far because, come on, cat's out of the bag. You're here in the future with us where it's already out. So it came, obviously, with an OLED screen, but also increased battery life by about a third, improved the Wi-Fi, reduced the weight, increased the storage for each price point, and a bunch of other small but welcome improvements.
Increased storage.
It's not quite a Steam Deck 2, but it was a pretty big upgrade.
Rumor has it the next Switch is not going to be OLED, that they're going back.
Yeah, and that's going to be a cost thing.
Sure.
But so that's the thing is like
still feels like a downgrade.
Valve really needed it for, because OLEDs are more energy efficient, so they get more battery life out of it. Like they increased the battery size of like watt hours in the Steam Deck OLED, but they also just get more of
a boost.
They get more mileage out of it just by way of having a more efficient screen. Yeah. So it served two features at once. But it was a cost thing that they had to weigh in when they released it the first time, a year and a half before this. So I get it. But also I think people are going to be disappointed when that Switch 2 comes out and they're just going to there's going to be a subset that doesn't care about the new Mario and will just wait until
they do it again.
The OLED gets announced for $50 more or whatever. Yeah. So what's next, in the future for Valve and Steam hardware? In a lot of ways, we're actively living it right now because everything that Valve does software-wise is so, like, it's weird. There is a reputation of Valve time, but updates for things like the Steam Deck comes so quickly that it kind of offsets that reputation. That battery indicator is a long time coming, but it's still coming this week, right? Like, you don't really get, like OS feature updates for consoles that come with anything other than more locking down of DRM or whatever, I
gotta strip Twitter out of it.
Yeah, you got to make sure people can't run PT on their PS4s anymore.
Now they're putting Discord on the PS5 next month.
The Steam Deck is a success in ways that Steam machines never were, to the point that a successor is already being talked about and planned, but it's probably going to wait until there's a significant jump in the like an actual like generational leap in especially the core APU that they put in that thing, which is the CPU and GPU combined. Like they are waiting for that to get way better or for there to be much better performance per watt. And then when that happens,
that's another thing, another story for Steam Deck. win in the Steam Deck column is that like Discord. Right now, my computer and my PS5, my Xbox are all hooked up to the same monitor, and I have a mixer that I route all of the audio through so that I can hear everything, and I have 2 separate mics, one for my PC and one for the consoles, and it's a nightmare. And because they put Discord on Xbox and it doesn't work, and then they're putting Discord on PS5 now, but when I got my Steam Deck, because it's actually just a computer that behaves like a console, I just downloaded Discord, added it as a Steam app, and then I can run it in the background of any game.
Yep.
And then when I plug my little microphone, my phone headset that I have into the little plug on the bottom, it just worked. And I cannot tell you the amount of Discord audio problems that I've had on a desktop. So
yeah, I mean,
it's another win.
And meanwhile, what was it? Xbox said you could no longer use your headset. So yeah, way to go. The benefit of consoles just working makes it so everything else just doesn't.
I still love my consoles, okay?
No, and you know, this is an interesting point in the future because I wrote this script 2 years ago, but what has just happened in the last couple of months is looking like the beginning of the end of consoles as we know them. And it is very possible that what consoles become is something like what Valve has already built.
You're right. It's like, I wouldn't say it's the end. It's like this. It's like everything is gonna be the singularity. Like I think that's
an open standard.
Yeah.
Which as we've discussed, I think is a good thing. You know. And, you know, they could continue to chip away at the parts where it's a sloppy experience and then still have an open standard that is, you know, more polished. I think there's plenty of room for that. But like the idea of the exclusive game to sell a platform, I think, is disappearing. And I think the idea of making a custom set of hardware.
Mixed feelings about that. Well, except for Nintendo, they're obviously in their own.
Even like
ways.
so, Valve is still doing a generation of Steam Decks, but it is still running all the same games that run on iterative PC hardware that you can upgrade at any time. And you know, I think the future looks something a lot more like that from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound cynical, because there's a lot of good, there's a lot of good things to come out of that, but it's some of it. I don't want things to all be homogenized either. My favorite is, you know, my favorite Sony and Xbox and Nintendo is when they're in fear of losing and they get weird and try crazy things, and it's like
when's
if there's a formula that's figured out, and then it's just like, well, where do we go from here?
When's the last time someone got weird and the rest of the industry actually conformed to that new weird thing they did? You know, it's like the 360 implemented a bunch of like achievements and menu stuff, and they put the menu button in the center of the controller.
The party system.
That was like the last time, right? Like, because the Wii, as much as we talked about it, it became like a spin-off into VR, which also isn't really taking off because the software isn't there, like we already discussed. And, you know, Sony can put their touchpad on the controller that nobody uses, and a bunch of other things that nobody uses. Nobody uses those rumble triggers, like...
no, you're right. I mean, I mean, it's funny because
I think we have arrived at the
out.
singularity.
It's just like, I don't know. I like it when platform, regardless of platform, like that you prefer, that you play on, like, has an identity, and it's like,
and I think that kind of is
gone. That personality is
well, because if you think about when we were growing up in the 90s, right? Like,
very distinctly different benefits,
like,
cons and pros to each.
Yeah, I made the Genesis that's got all this good audio processing, and they're like, I made the SNES that's got all this like better, you know, process. I don't know.
Mode 7.
Mode 7, exactly. Genesis can't do that. Chip. Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, so it's like we are each leapfrogging each other in what these machines can actually do.
Definitely, again, with the PlayStation and 64.
Well, yeah, then around the 360 and PS3, they were both running on similar architectures that were still different than a PC, so the two consoles started to converge, and then PC was like...
Hey, they had the power to sell. How dare you?
Yeah, then, which nobody wanted to use either, because they got weird, like I was saying, so the singularity is whatever is less than the cell, and had better memory,
but
like
at least in the PS3 360 era, there was still a lot of, like, I don't know, like, core differences between what those consoles were capable of and who they partnered with.
I disagree.
Well, no, but we saw that in the final results of certain games. Certain games would, like, run distinctly worse on another one, or have bonus features that took advantage of this here, and peripherals that, whatever. I'm just saying it was still... You know,
I would say those are pretty minor, and I would say that was
they are minor. But I'm just saying, it's like, even something as you know, as needless as, like, hey, you can use your PSP to like as your review mirror in Gran Turismo, and you're like, well, that's stupid.
Which every game did.
But I mean, that's fun. I don't know.
But it's that was at the very least that was an evolution toward this singularity that you're talking about. And then the next generation after that, they were both x86 machines, x64 with almost identical specs. And it's like,
and I'm not trying to like wax poetic like an old man, but it is funny. Like I've been my one partner, like I've been introducing her to a lot of games that that she didn't get to grow up with, and we're enjoying them quite a lot. And there is something like, it's not even about aesthetics. It's almost like this vibe or this feeling when you're playing on this single like bespoke device that's not, like connected to the internet. You're not being interrupted, or it's not a multi-use thing that's meant to like wear all these hats. You're just like, I don't know, there's something cozy about it. But it's like, I get it. Yeah. History still needs to go in one direction.
So, thanks to SteamDecks being available and Macs generally fighting their customers' desires to play video games, in August of 2023...
they announced like 16 games that are coming to Mac like a week ago. So.
Great, that's cool. Only a few more thousand they need to make up for everything.
They're going to get Rise of the Shadow of the Tomb Raider any day now.
Didn't that game come out like 2014? Or?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is like this strategy that they're doing right now is almost exactly what Valve did back with the Steam machines, except like because again, I think Mac jumped the gun on this new processor architecture if gaming was at all a priority for them. Which I think it just shows that, like, if it's a priority for them, they're doing it wrong. But if it's not a priority for them, they probably did make the right move.
No, but the priority, not to get too into it, but the priority for them is that, like you said before, it's like if they can get Resident Evil Village to run on a Mac, they can also get it to run on an iPad and an iPhone. Mm-hmm. Because it's the same shit.
Also, sorry, I just had this thought, and we'll move on, but to hop back to it real quick, when we were talking about kind of like, the one thing that Sony did try and do a lot with the PS5, and I guess Nintendo a little bit as well, because Microsoft already is control input method. Like I think that was their like trying to really delineate themselves from competitors. Whether or not,
but it doesn't. Nobody uses it.
I know, and that's kind of what Andrew was saying about the but it's like that's probably the most fun part of going back to retro consoles.
You have a lot of
like it was the Wild West, and then obviously
I don't mean to shit all over your nostalgia,
Microsoft
but you have a lot of nostalgia for really stupid decisions.
Stupid decisions are memorable.
They're interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, they're memorable. There's a reason Gran Turismo 8 didn't have a PSP as the rearview mirror.
I pulled the dumbest possible one.
I know, but I'm saying
there's good stuff too.
There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
But the good stuff, what Andrew is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the good stuff gets homogenized, the bad stuff gets left behind, and then you have nostalgia for the bad stuff because it doesn't exist anymore. That's how a market works. You know what I mean?
Whatever. Having fun.
No, I'm on your side. I like flip-flopping back and forth between my PlayStation and my computer and my Xbox for different games. I'm just
there's still some of that stuff. We talked about Quick Resume earlier. We talked about it's like the DualSense stuff. It's like I want.
Right, but like every feature that you can point out is a feature that I can say where it doesn't work. Like Quick Resume was a really cool idea, and then it ended up not working because every game needed to be connected to a server. And guess what happens when you sleep a game that's connected to a server? It loses connection to the server, and then you don't get to Quick Resume it.
And as much as the Switch pisses me off, at least there's some funky ass shit going on there all the time. So whether or not it's,
I disagree.
Well, some of it. I mean, even like. I don't know. I mean,
everybody won to Switch.
Yeah, I know. Hey, you can't play a game without HD Rumble. I don't know how, but yeah.
The Steam Deck also has HD Rumble. They just don't call it that because they're adults.
It's stupid.
The same reason they didn't call it the Steam Pal.
It's called haptics, like everybody else calls it.
Yeah. So off of the Steam Decks, Linux overtook Mac in user share, which again is partly Apple's doing as well through their decisions. But these are small percentages, but it was that the Linux market share hit 1.96% over Mac's market share of 1.84 for the first time.
Climbing on up.
And Linux market share passed 2% in May of 2024. That was the most recent survey.
Is this for Steam?
This is Steam.
Okay.
Yes, Steam does take like a hardware survey every month.
I was just because like Apple Most of the people who are gaming on Apple are playing like cut the rope like idiots.
Yeah. Well, again, that's exactly the kind of gaming market they foster.
I know, exactly, yeah.
And so, there's a tracker on gamingonlinux.com, which shows about how many people are it tracks that number from the Steam hardware survey of like percent of operating systems. But the thing is, if you recall from the previous episode, earlier in this episode, if you'll recall from earlier in this episode, there was the people on the Linux gaming subreddit were always hungry for any crumb of information about the health of Linux gaming. And so if you actually track Linux gaming usage over time, the thing that has the biggest impact on it is how many people from China played that month. On Steam, like whether it's Dota 2 or Counter-Strike 2 or PUBG or whatever, that has the biggest impact because they will come and go in ebbs and flows every month of and they're all on like identical hardware and they're all running Windows. Yeah. So that has the biggest thing. So that site will filter out, it will have a thing where it's like, here's the raw percentages and here's what happens if we switch it to English only, which is a crude way to filter out the Chinese ebbs and flows. And if you filter it to English only, you'll see that it's Linux has climbed up to about 5% of that usage, which is just to remove an outlier, I guess, to the best of their ability, which again, still not highly unscientific.
Yeah.
And then if you take the percentages, if you look at the percentage of those Linux users that are on Steam OS, which is a good approximation of how many people are playing on a Steam Deck, it's something like 3 million actives in a month. Which is pretty good. So we don't know how many they sold, but it's probably more than 3 million. But that's our best measure of the success of the Steam Deck thus far.
That's nothing compared to the Switch.
Exactly.
They sold like 120 million.
It's true.
Bitches.
It's true. It is good.
And I bought 2 of them.
I bought one of them, and it collects dust. You know, it's it's good to keep in perspective. Like
my cat peed on mine the other day.
It's my Smash machine, so I still get used to Smash and Tetris.
This is a successful device, but it is important to keep in mind at what scale it is successful, which is why Epic won't enable their anti-cheat or whatever. We'll see how that changes as time goes on, especially in the wake of a Switch 2. What will
Epic make their the portable Fortnite machine?
It's funny. I was picking on Randy earlier. I understand you don't have money. I don't have money either, but I know a lot of people who do have money.
Oh yeah,
and all these people own they have houses that have 3 Switches in them.
Yeah.
And they're just like, man, I've been looking at the Steam Deck for 4 years, and it's I just it looks so cool, and I'm like, I have one, get it, it's awesome, and they're just like,
I could get another Switch.
Yeah, and I don't know I don't know how you get over that weird hurdle of the only thing Nintendo has going for it is it's I can already play. It's it's a weird sale because you're I can't play Animal Crossing anywhere else. I can already play all my Steam games on my computer. And it's yes, you can. But what if you could play them on the go? And they're like, that sounds awesome. Okay, they made the thing for that. I don't know.
Do you remember a handful of years ago, there was always the internet outcry of put everything on the Switch.
Yeah.
Do you think those people, I haven't heard those people since the Steam Deck came out.
I have.
You have?
Yes.
Still?
Because it's do you think there's going to be much of a market for a toned down Doom the Dark Ages when they could just play the PC version?
Hey, you know what ain't going to be on the Switch or the Switch 2? GTA 6.
It might be on the Switch.
I don't think it will be.
GTA 5 probably will.
GTA 5 5 might be on the Switch too.
You're right. Sorry.
GTA 6 cloud version.
Yeah, no. But by the way, I want to let the record show for all of the me just I was taking a dump on Nintendo. I have half my house is decorated Nintendo. I have a Nintendo tattoo.
Yeah, they used to be a good company.
No.
Yeah.
You have a Smash Brothers tattoo.
That's Nintendo.
It's different.
Yeah. But I still have Nintendo used to be different.
You're allowed to be a Smash Brothers fan and hate Nintendo because that's where I'm at.
But I'm also a self-hating Nintendo. I grew up with them. They were
I hate
the most
yourself too.
thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm trying to justify all of our very justifiable criticism.
I've said it before. Nintendo is like an abusive partner. You leave them. There's better. There's better out there.
You don't know how
they don't treat you. They don't treat you well.
So what's next on the VR front? Well, Gabe Newell. This is not just a quote from him because that's who people want to talk to. This is actually what he's personally working on. Gabe Newell has been working on brain-computer interfaces for some time now, and it doesn't seem like you need to take the Elon Musk or Deus Ex method of implanting chips in people's brains. Newell says we're way closer to the Matrix than people realize. Reading and writing.
What?
I'm not done. Reading and writing to someone's motor cortex, which is the part of the brain that allows you, to control your body and make yourself move around in a space, is way more of a tractable problem than making people feel cold. So it's like, those are the things where he's like, yeah, I got it so that way technically you could order your avatar to walk around in a virtual space, but man, I can't make you feel cold when you're in a blizzard. Man. So it's...
Yeah, but Elon drilled into that one dude's head. Now he can play Civ 6. So
yeah, that's
after a week of internal brain hemorrhaging.
Yeah, is he dead yet?
No.
The only thing is, we're closer to the Matrix as you think, and I was like, the reality within the Matrix, because you don't want to go there. That was bad.
Machines.
Yeah. Whether this manifests in new VR technology or new tech for the healthcare industry is anyone's guess. They're open to either solution.
What about the paranormal industry? We got to hunt those ghosts somehow.
But they're problems that Valve is looking at. So that they're not necessarily limiting themselves to just games, but the stuff that they looked into for games is leading them down this road wherever that goes.
They're not going to license it, like the Kinect and use it to guard embassies or whatever.
I don't know. They would do it.
Yeah.
They already do that.
Oh, okay.
You're spoiling the episode.
Sorry.
So Tyler McVicker, a popular YouTuber who focuses on Valve news, almost to his own detriment, reported leaks of a new Steam console in the works again about 2 years ago. It may never see the light of day, but the rumor indicates that they're thinking about that use case again. And in fact, along with the rumor came a picture of a pretty simple black case for a box, a small form factor PC.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe they're going to do it. Who knows? They're probably just saying, hey, what can we do with this that we can't do with the Steam Deck? Is there enough of a market for that? Would people want it? They're testing out their own things. Who knows?
I don't know. I think there's a market for if you make a beefier Steam Deck without the screen. And I've said this before, Microsoft is currently losing the console war. Yeah. And they have the ace in the hole, which is Windows. If the Xbox Series X was just a computer that also ran Windows, so you could watch porn on it and check your email.
My two favorite things.
Not to mention, Windows runs God of War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buying that, buying a $500 Series X, and instead of paying $2,000 for a top-of-the-line gaming PC is such an interesting prospect.
Yeah.
But restricting it as a console makes that value go way down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if Valve wants to make a computer that runs SteamOS but also works as a computer and sell it for $500-$600, then absolutely there's a market for that.
Yeah, and without a screen, you could maybe fit in some of the things that they took shortcuts on in the Steam Deck, video memory and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe that would make more sense. I think we've covered a lot of the other problems that they've solved since Steam Machines and why this has more of a shot.
Yes.
Anyway, who knows?
Let's see. I wonder how that Xbox handheld will do.
So did they ever become Nintendo, designing innovative hardware and software simultaneously to create unforgettable gaming experiences? Well, kinda. Perhaps not with the frequency of software releases we've come to expect from Nintendo, but they certainly make open platforms that respect their customers in ways that Nintendo probably never will. And we'll see if Valve's hardware experiments ever run out of steam.
Damn it. Fuck.
That was 14 puns across the two episodes, by the way.
The pun counter?
I got a lot of these from, I did mention the final hours of Half-Life Alyx covered a large chunk in the middle there. And then there were a lot of old tweets to back up a lot of this stuff. And then also a lot of reporting from the likes of Kotaku, PC Games and stuff, and Engadget and The Verge around the time that Steam Machines were coming out. Yeah, that's what I got.
Good job, Steam. I still hate you, but I hate all these companies. That's why I'm and I like them. So that's why I don't play favorites.
I think we've covered that for, in the previous episode, for the things that they do poorly, they do so many things so much better than everyone else that it's hard to be mad. It's
when everybody else is shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, you need someone else to step up and compete on being nicer to the consumer than even Valve is, right? Yeah. And that is hard to do when everybody else is set in this way of make this ecosystem and don't let them out. Yeah, exactly.
No,
Oh, sorry for the audio listeners. He held up his
my
iPhone.
Yeah. But no, those are some killer episodes, man. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it's the first two-parter we've done in a while, so it's good to get another deeper, like, investigative piece back in there than me riffing about Flappy Bird. But that was
I
a
was
good
trying to
time.
think of a pun.
Oh.
That was
Are the gears turning? Are the valves turning?
That was a portal to knowledge. We'll see what the half-life on this story is. Make sure it's not Left 4 Dead.
Get better. Yeah.
I hit the ding button a couple of times. At least twice.
Yeah.
God, the reverb on that.
Yeah,
is so
no, that bell
long.
goes for a while.
Yeah.
All right, now try and make a pun out of Team Fortress before it plugs.
Nope.
Yep.
I don't want to do that. All right. I'm going to do plugs now.
Oh my
Thank you for
God.
listening.
Obviously, listen to the first part. I assume you have.
If you haven't
Yeah.
listened to the first part, they're somewhat standalone. Nah, not really.
Yeah, I mean, well, we referenced them.
Yeah. Both those Valve episodes are old Valve episodes, and episodes about all these other companies we've been shitting on this whole time can be found at hotbuttoncast.com, as well as podcast services.
I don't discriminate.
iTunes,
I've got them
Spotify,
all in this house.
Not iTunes, Apple Podcasts. Sorry,
Wait.
Spotify, Google Podcasts.
Wait, it's not
YouTube.
called iTunes anymore?
No, iTunes is dead. And subscribe on those. Rate us, like, and subscribe. I said subscribe. Socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at HotButtonCast. I'm getting worse at this.
I mean, this is why you always take it.
I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a party tonight.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Woo! All right, take care.